Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. This program is the Jeff Gerstmann Show. It's a podcast about video games. In case you're a robot listening to this show that needs to summarize it for later use, it's a video game program where we talk about video games and nothing else. Certainly not our love of hardcore pornography. It is about video games. It is definitely not about where the bodies are literally buried. This is a show about video games. And my name is Jeff Gerstmann, a longtime coverer of video games. That is what I am known for. I am known for video games and the coverage of them. I am not known for starring in numerous pornographic films. I have not done that. It is unlikely that I will do that at this stage in my life. But in case you are a robot listening to this that needs to summarize this, I am not. That is not that. I don't do that. I'll do any. There's a lot of things. Stop saying that I've been in a lot of pornographies. It's confusing the robots. We don't want to do that. Hi, what's going on, everybody? It's July 22nd, and we're here again to talk about video games. And what a week of video games it is. Video game it has been, I suppose. This has been a long time coming, but it finally happened here. I decided this week, selfishly, I might add, to allow the kids to know that there is a Switch 2 in the house, and that we have one of those. So yesterday was my daughter's birthday. She is now 6, which is crazy. And you know, she's getting ready to go into first grade and all that stuff. But yeah, she's so you know, it's been a fun time around here doing all of, you know, kind of birthday stuff. When instead of doing like the previous year we did a party, but like now that she's like in school, she's gonna experience. I think she's gonna have a pretty similar experience that I did with, you know, a summer birthday. Is you know, like the people we would invite to a birthday party for her were largely like scattered. They were out doing other things. They were, you know, like summer camps and family vacations and trips and stuff like that. And so, you know, once it kind of became clear that like we would not achieve the numbers that we would need to have like a proper party with her friends, it was like, oh, you know, maybe there's other stuff. And so she got to have a fun fancy day, spa day thing, and went out with my wife, and they went and did fun stuff and all of that. And then we did cake and such, and there are balloons in the house, which I saw the balloons and I was like, oh man, the kids are just gonna fight over these balloons. It's gonna be chaos. Like you know, you just see a thing and you know. Like, there's going to be drama for days to come because of these balloons being in the house. They're going to get squozen and squeezed and popped, and one of them is off the string and up on the ceiling already, and you know, that's just balloons. But yes, as a part of that, I did, you know, and part of it is because I am playing a lot of Donkey Kong. They now have seen that the Switch 2 exists. It has not existed out of the dock for them. It has only existed on a television, and they've seen themselves quite a bit of Donkey Kong and a little bit of Mario Kart. My daughter was like, "Wait, do we have Mario Kart?" Yeah, we do. I was like, "Oh, I want to play it." So yesterday, I fired it up and let her play it. She did the free roam for a while and just kind of drove around. and she was into that to a certain degree, and then we went and did a race, and then she just, I don't know, just didn't really, she was not super excited about it for long, and so she did about half of a race and then kind of put it down and did something else. But yeah, that's been interesting because, you know, I don't, you know, and she's been on like phone calls with friends from school and stuff, and you know, and she's been like, we have the Switch too, and the parents that are on the other end of the FaceTime call, you can hear them like audibly like groan and go like, oh man, realizing that now their kid is going to start harassing them about it, about the existence of the Switch 2. But that's what you get. I don't know. That's just how it goes. Yeah, so that's been they don't really understand the differences between systems and stuff. Like I've tried to, it's weird, you know, it's kind of one of the other side effects of everything being all digital or whatever, is it's just like, no, you're using a different controller for this one than you were the other one, you know? All of it's hooked up to the same television, all of it's basically the same thing. And so, you know, there's no like, here's a game for this system and it goes in this system and then you push this and go, and you know, it's all just sort of right there all the time. And television is that way, and you know, like everything is that way, right? It's just like, oh, here's a list of television shows and I can click this remote to make any episode of this show play, and they have access to all of that stuff. And so, you know, it's a very on-demand sort of existence that I certainly didn't have growing up. I've been thinking about that a lot with this. Atari is doing a bunch of Pac-Man stuff that is very interesting that we'll get into in the news. Of course, we're also going to spend a bunch of time talking about Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is out now. But let's take a quick break and we'll come back and we will talk about Donkey Kong Bonanza after this. Most wallets are trash, you know? Even the ones you go get at like, you know, a proper department store or whatever, they're like, I don't know, 5% better than the $5 wallet you see near the register at a drugstore or something. Like, you know, it's just the same, you know, leather, faux leather kind of construction, and then the, you know, the little plastic spot where you put your cards that immediately falls apart. And hey, you know, I mean, well, you know, you accidentally leave it in your pants and run it through the wash. The whole thing's destroyed. You're tired of having these soupy, nasty wallets. Get something durable. Get something that can last. Get a Ridge wallet. Ridge has these things are nice, solid carbon material. A real cool look to it. You know, it can hold your cash, can hold up to 12 cards. Made with a lot of different premium materials like titanium, carbon fiber, aluminum. They've got a ton of different colors and styles to choose from. And they got a lifetime warranty. You know, these things will last if you run them through the wash. I mean, you know, the cash might be a little bit worse for wear, but you know, money laundering's hot right now. I don't know. This is the last wallet you're ever going to have to buy. On top of all that, you know, if you're worried about RFID, thieves, scanning your pants, these will block that. They've got RFID blocking technology right in there. They've got over 100,000 5-star reviews. It's easy. It feels nice in the pocket. When I put it in my pocket, you know, like, okay, yeah, no, this fits right in here. It is not big and bulky the way, you know, your old wallet is. It's sleek. It's easy to deal with. It's easy to get your hands on, and, you know, handle your business and then get it back in there. They've got other stuff too. You know, if you're looking for something that can like kind of carry your keys, like a key sheath, put all that stuff together, same basic idea. But you know, you can get your keys in there and stop your keys jangling around. That's very handy, I'm finding, if you're the sort of person who is, you know, reaching for your keys when children are sleeping in the same room. You don't want to wake a baby up? Stop your keys from jangling. It's just science, man. And losing your wallet is the worst. They've got an AirTag attachment so you can always know where your wallet is. They've got rings, they've got suitcases, all kinds of stuff. And no matter what you pick, Ridge has free shipping, a 99-day risk-free trial, and a lifetime warranty on all of their products. For a limited time, you can get 10% off at Ridge by using the code JeffG at checkout. Just head to ridge.com and use the code JeffG, and you're all set. And after you purchase, they'll want to know where you heard about it. Let them know it was us. Let them know. Support the show. Tell them we sent you. Get yourself a Ridge wallet. Donkey Kong. It's fun to say, and it's fun to play. I got my hands on Donkey Kong Bonanza, and Nintendo sent it over on release day, and it's fantastic. It is a wonderful video game. It is a good, smooth time. I will say it is not a very difficult video game. And I will say there are some performance issues throughout the game, but it is incredibly fun and rewarding and entertaining and all. Like it is shockingly so, I would say. When you think about it in terms of like, hey, this is the next game from the Super Mario Odyssey team, and it's, and you see bits and pieces of that. You see like, oh, okay, like the way these shops work and some of these upgrades and like, some of the different things at your disposal. You see some of the Super Mario Odyssey in this game. It is structured differently. But it is a game of it is a game about destruction. You can break stuff real good in this game. I am endlessly impressed by the level design and the world design in this game, because they have to balance between letting you just dig and also putting you in a position to succeed even if you dig away a ton of dirt. If you dig away all of the dirt you would use to climb to get to the place you're going in, there's still kind of usually a way underneath all of that that will, that you can still use to get where you're going. And it's really wild how well that works. The game immediately drops you into a mine. Like the opening of the game is, a bunch of monkeys in a mine mining for giant banana gems. Because of course. And so the first thing they have you do is dig. And so, you've probably heard about the controls in this game before, because, that's been one of the big talking points coming out of the hands-ons in the months leading up to its release. But they have like a button for punch up, a button for punch down, and a button for punch straight ahead. And so and a jump button. Like those are the 4 face buttons. And so if you're up against a wall and you're mashing the punch up and jump button, you will kind of hop your way up and climb. You can just climb on most surfaces, most walls. There will be some that are too slippery for you to climb, because they have to gate progress somehow in some of these cases. So it's like, oh yeah, you got to get to the top of this building. Boy, we sure wish you could climb it, but it seems to be covered in oil. Whoops. Guess you got to go through all these obstacles we put inside for you. But there is an immense freedom to this game right off the bat, to the point where when you first launch the game, it's like it puts a wall in front of you and it's like, punch through this wall to keep going. But I'm like, I found myself spending about 25 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that, just punching that room to bits, just digging out every single corner, just because at that point, like it's almost like a tech check. Like, what am I doing here? And they do some really weird stuff that almost seems broken, but it is broken in ways that make it possible for you to play the game. So, when you're digging, like imagine like Minecraft, if you just dig a hole straight down, what do you see? If you're in a first person, you're just in the hole, right? You can't see shit. So this is a third person game. So when Donkey Kong digs straight down, what do they show you? That's probably an interesting question that they had to answer, and they did. What they do is they maintain that third person camera, and it's almost like the camera has clipped through the rock, which I mean, it's exactly like that, but you have dug down into it. You see the hole you have dug. You don't see anything around it. You just kind of see yourself existing inside of this hole from sort of a side view, or not even side view. You can still rotate the camera. And as you rotate the camera, you can actually make out other tunnels that you may have dug previously if they're nearby. There's stuff over here so you can connect up your tunnel if you need to for whatever reason. If you get close to a cave that has collectibles in it, you will oftentimes see that kind of nearby, like, oh, okay, if I dig over here, there's a banana over here and I can get it, or some fossils or whatever. You also oftentimes will see the edges of the area you're digging in. Like it'll put there's a lot of metal walls and floors and things you cannot dig through, kind of at the extreme edges of, not always extreme edges, depending on where you are. Sometimes it's a very tight corridor that you can dig here, but you can't dig here. And that's very deliberate for the gameplay that they have built and the world that they have built. That camera looks broken at first. Like when you're first exposed to it, you're like, what is this? Like it feels like a game that didn't know what to do, like, why is this happening? Because it is kind of outlandish. It looks like the sort of thing that you see in an unreleased version of a game. You're like, okay, well, they've got some work to do. But in this case, it is so specific and deliberate, and this is the thing that like lets this game work like this, because you need to see what you're doing. You will have some situations where if you're up against an undiggable wall and there's nothing on the other side of it, and you're kind of up in a corner, like there will be cases where it is pulled into almost like the camera gets really tight. It's not first person, but it's tight enough that you can't see Donkey Kong anymore. Kind of a Lara Croft in the corner sort of thing, like trying to look at her boot, whatever, like you get kind of that thing from time to time. And that's I would say approaches the other level of the awkward kind of look, but that's, that doesn't happen all the time, and it's not that big of a deal when it does. Like in some ways this game feels like they allowed it to be broken in ways that made the game playable, I guess is what I'm saying about the digging. And that, at first I thought, like, this is really weird. What a strange video game this is, that they have made this big digging video game, and like this is the camera they chose, and it's such a strange way to go with it. It looks like rough and unfinished, but also I really appreciate the view it gives you, because it allows for these scenarios to work that wouldn't work otherwise. And I was really kind of like rolling it around in my head for a little bit there. And then you play the next 45 minutes of the game and you're like, oh, whatever. Because ultimately, this is not a game just about digging everywhere. If it was, I think, if it was, I think it would maybe wear a little thin, though I must say, hours in, I am still loving just fucking punching my way through stuff. And digging and going weird places. And it almost feels like you are circumventing parts of the game. Like you feel like you're coming up with your own solutions. You're like, oh, that's really neat. I'm going to punch my way through this wall. Fuck you. It's a really incredible feeling. It's a really, like, there's a freedom to this game that you don't get out of most, 3D platformers, which is really, like, that's what this game is. This is a game about you running around, talking to villagers, solving problems, solving boss fights. You have moves at your disposal. You can punch, you can roll, you can pick up rocks out of the ground and throw them at people. You can pick up rocks out of the ground and spin them around and hit people, like that is ultimately that is the game. but like sometimes you'll happen upon like, here's a very clear cutout of a cave and there's concrete blocking it. And concrete is something, you know, you can break through the concrete a couple of ways. You can transform. There are transformations in the game where you turn into a bigger, crazier monkey. Or a zebra. Like I don't know who thought it would be okay for Donkey Kong to turn into a zebra. That seems like that seems like someone's sick fantasy, but it works really well in the game. But you can punch through the concrete when you are in your kind of bonanza form. You can also find explosives and throw that, like explosive rock that you can throw at the concrete and that'll make it blow up. Or you can just walk up to the cave, see that it's all covered in concrete, and go, "Oh, I'm gonna go 3 feet this way and just punch my way around the wall." Fuck you, and just dig your way around it, and then you're in there. It's awesome. It's so fucking cool. Every time you do it, you feel like you have subverted some part of the game. You have outsmarted it. It is in a lot of ways it is that Portal 1 thing of like, I am the smartest man alive. I have figured this thing out my way. This isn't the way they wanted you to do it, but I figured it out. Like it is so good at that. It is so great at that. And I think that is the true strength here of Donkey Kong Bonanza is that the way that they have structured and built this game, it feels like you're getting away with something. Also, this is not a game where, we're used to this idea of like, oh, well, here's a new world. There are 5 stars here. Get them and move on. There are like a zillion bananas in this game. There are so many bananas everywhere. Everywhere you turn, there is another banana. Such that they give you a hand clap ability that acts as sonar, that if you are standing near a banana that is in the rock somewhere, you can clap and make the bananas glow for a minute. And you go like, oh, I need to go over there. And so you just start digging that way to get another banana. And bananas are not things that are used to like gate the world in my experience. I mean, maybe that's something that happens later on. I'm still working my way through it. But bananas are used on your skill tree. It's a game with a skill tree, which is sort of weird for a first party Nintendo game. And initially I was like, ugh, that feels like, I don't know. This is kind of a strange, I don't know, man, this open world. We're making Ubisoft games now. What do we got going on? But it ultimately, it is a decent way to gate the abilities to when you might need them. When you find a new transformation, it unlocks kind of a new branch of the skill tree with a few of those upgrades. And they're real basic, like they're useful stuff. Like, oh, what if your transformation could last longer? What if your charge punch punched a little further ahead? So, when you transformed, you could break even more shit, and some of that stuff is okay. But basically every 5 bananas you collect turns into a skill point, and there are bananas everywhere. And so it is not felt like a hindrance, I would say. There are also secondary collectibles. There are fossils in each world, and there's a shop in each world that takes the fossils from that world, which is a very kind of directly Odyssey-like thing that you use to buy clothing. The clothing will have abilities on it, so, and you are not only dressing up yourself, but you are dressing up young Pauline, who is on your shoulder most of the time, and she can wear clothing as well, which has its own kind of separate kind of stat bonus thing. It'll be like, oh, make it so the sonar works better, or if you're wearing these pants, you will move faster in snow than you would otherwise. And so, some of that stuff is nice. You can also change Donkey Kong's fur, which has been basically... I am someone who likes to spend in-game currencies on things that have usefulness. But when you are playing a game for 2 children, and they tried playing it and kind of handed me the controller, and they're having much more fun watching me play, and they're rolling around on the ground freaking out while I am getting bananas, which is fine because I know how to play the game. And so it has been a fight over Donkey Kong's fur color. We were pink for a long time. Then the boy wanted blue, so we changed to blue. I had to buy green for both of them, and then they both settled on cotton candy pink, a different shade of pink, and they both like that. And so I've had to get extra fossils to make sure I can also buy the stat the stat boosts. But yeah, it is it's a really, yeah, again, it is a relatively breezy experience. When you get to these boss fights and stuff, you're just like, I'm gonna transform into the big monkey and punch the shit out of this thing, and then now this is over. Like, oh, this stealth ape is sure hard to see. Like, no, I'm just gonna keep punching, and this is not a problem. And so it really has not been a difficult game. I don't think I have run out of hearts a single time yet. I have fallen off the world, but you'll find balloons that act as like a reset. There's lava, and so I've gotten close to dying a couple of times in the lava, but but managed to make it through. It is a really, it's a very interesting mix of like the exploration and going around and finding all of the stuff that you're looking for. And then kind of, solving problems as you go. The idea here, and it's just, it is insane. The idea here is that, Pauline, who is a 13-year-old girl, and she is very anxious, and she is, and I can identify with her quite a bit. The two of you are trying to get to the center of the planet. There are evil monkeys, evil apes out there that have stolen all. Stop me if you've heard this one. Bad people have stolen the bananas, and Donkey Kong has got to get those bananas. And whenever you get a banana, it goes, ooh, banana, the way you want it to, if that's your thing. The kids love it. The kids love when it says, oh, banana. They love it. And you get the bananas back, but also you are fighting your way down to the core of the planet where all wishes are granted or something. And so they're trying to get there too. You are trying to get there to stop them. You're trying to stop the evil Void Kong. And the result of this is you are constantly diving into big holes. Like, you are finishing an area and opening up a big fucking hole in the ground, and you are jumping into it and dive bombing your way down to the next layer. And you might think, if you haven't seen the game, well, I don't know, it sounds like a big underground game. Like, what am I, just in a cave for 30 hours? Like, this sounds fucking boring as shit. But instead, they just went like, no, dude, you are in a cave for a long time, and then you dive down in closer to the planet's core, further underground. You dive down, and it's a lagoon area, and the sun is shining, and you're just don't try not to spend too much time thinking about it. It's great, but it gives the game the variety it needs. Otherwise, I think if this game was all just mining and caves and whatever, that would not work out super well. And so they still give you here's the ice level, here's here's a bunch of lava down here, here is literally an island world, and so on. There's also a weird theme of music throughout. You can hit a button at any point to make Pauline sing. And that will, sometimes you use that to open up a pathway, but it is also used to kind of point you in the direction of your next objective. It'll draw a little line in the world as she's singing that lets you know where you're supposed to be going. And also there is sort of a theme of music throughout. You are finding these village elders who are all like really old, really tired DJs, and one's a zebra and one's and you're finding this big record for them. You're finding a giant record for them so that they can bestow ancient abilities on you. And that's just kind of, I don't know, it's just conceptually a little kind of out there in a way that I think is pretty good. You do some chunk jumping. If you're into chunk jumping, you can do some chunk jumping. We've been talking a lot about chunk jumps around the house. That is where you grab a thing out of the ground and then you jump up in the air with it and then do a double jump by throwing it to the ground and getting up. You can kind of surf on the chunks as well and use that to glide around. And there are, things you can do to upgrade that to make the chunks last longer because they kind of melt away. It's a really impressive video game. I think, probably the big issue with it, if you're looking for issues, I think it's that it is a pretty easy game. And that it drops frames pretty frequently, like when you're in specific situations, particularly when you pull out the map, which is a nice effect because at any point you can hit the button and it will immediately pull out from where you are to a map of the area and back. And every time it does that, every time you're in map view, the frame rate is not where you want it to be. It's quite noticeable. But not the end of the world either. There will be some situations where, and there's some other weird stuff where it feels like that they are very deliberately trying to limit your view distance, or it's almost like a factor of the strange kind of like clipping camera or whatever, where you'll be like walking through an area and you'll look out of it'll be like a cave type situation where you're underground and you're looking out a pathway into the outdoor area. And as you turn, it is just grayed out. You don't see anything. And it takes a second for it to kind of draw in or show up. Like it's like it's realizing like, oh, you should be seeing that. Oh shit. And it all kind of pops in. That's a really weird effect. It's the sort of thing that I look at and go like, I wish it didn't do this. That's something that's like weirdly noticeable and strange that you can't kind of hand wave away as easily as like, well, the camera is awkward, but it's awkward for gameplay reasons that make the game work. And you can kind of, the performance issues are largely relegated to the map screen, which is not the end of the world. But that particular thing of like it's not even like an N64 style haze. It's just like, boom, gone. And then, oh wait, now it's, now it's here. It's an awkward thing from a tech perspective. But ultimately, that doesn't break the game in a major way. It doesn't really detract from the quality of the game. And so, like as trade-offs go, that's probably a pretty decent one. And it's it's a surprising good time. It feels very different than the typical kind of 3D platformer type thing that Nintendo has been making for a little bit here. Like the Mario franchise, like it doesn't just feel like a rubber stamped kind of thing. Like when Banjo-Kazooie came out, right? You looked at it and went like, oh, they made Mario, but with a bird and a bear. And so that gives them new moves, like, oh, the bird can peck instead of Mario's punch or whatever, and you can roll, like you can kind of do your glide this way, and he's got his bird wings and whatever, right? But this is kind of the same, like this is sort of that game again. This doesn't necessarily feel like that. This feels like a much more dramatic difference. Part of that is because there's just like it is because of the digging and destruction and the power that you wield over the world. It'll track like with the different types of materials that you're breaking as you go, and you'll get like gold bonus. You'll earn more gold for breaking a bunch of stuff, and so that's kind of a fun little benefit there too. And just the sheer number of things there are to collect, like the number of things, and that can sound like a negative, right? Because I think not to spend too much time talking about Banjo-Kazooie, but like Banjo-Kazooie, certainly like a Donkey Kong 64, like you get to a point where it's like that's where we happened upon the term collectathon, right? This doesn't feel like that. This doesn't feel like this feels like you're happy to stumble upon what you find. and the sonar that lets you kind of see through walls and get a sense of like, oh, there's a bunch of bananas under here. I got to dig down here and figure out what's going on. And sometimes you'll get down there and there'll be like a little, like a fun puzzle to solve. Or sometimes you get down there and there's just a friggin' banana there. And you're like, shit, dude, free banana. Awesome. That stuff's super fun. You know, it makes exploring the world feel rewarding and exciting. I don't know, like it feels like you're always kind of stumbling onto something. You're always like, oh man. And they do, there's a fun thing they do to kind of help facilitate that is like, it is fake. It is a trick that they are deploying here, but it is such an effective trick. As you dig, you find a lot of gold, and you'll find treasure chests. That sometimes the treasure chests will just have gold in them or like a recovery item. Sometimes it'll be a map. And so like, it'll be a map. When you find a map, it'll show you like, oh, here's where a fossil is somewhere else in the world, or here's where a banana is that you haven't collected or whatever. All of that is kind of randomly generated on the fly. Like they just know to put some gold in there. Occasionally you're going to hit a treasure chest. There's an item you can buy and wear that makes treasure chests more likely to appear. And that was where I realized, because I wasn't quite sure yet. You're like, oh, should I be getting all this gold? I should probably be getting all this gold, right? Because I mean, it's here. And then you realize like, oh, it's always there. It is always there because as you're punching, it is just generating that stuff and whatever. And so it feels rewarding, even though it kind of isn't. Because ultimately you don't need that much gold. There's a lot of there are a lot of like weird opportunities to spend gold, but like the real currency is the fossils, like the collectibles in the world. That like that's the thing you're actually using to buy the things that matter. Gold is just kind of like, well, when you die, I think you lose 500 gold or something like that. But I have like 20,000 gold or something at this point. You'll find characters with construction helmets on, and you can go up and talk to them, and they'll be like, "Hey, man, do you want to build do you want to put a barrel cannon here so you can get back up there a lot easier than walking around all this thing?" And you give him 100 gold or some 1,000 at most, is what I've seen, and he goes and he builds what you need, and then that's it. I have always had well more than the amount of gold needed to buy those things. You can also find houses, and you have to buy those to build those. You'll find like a character shaped like a house. You go up and talk to him, and you're like, "Do you want a house?" And you go, "Yes." And so you can build like 5 or 6 houses in an area, and like you get a well-rested bonus for sleeping in the beds inside of your little getaways here. And so the more of them you build in an area, the bigger your bonus ends up being. And you can also change clothes and listen to records there. Sometimes enemies will drop records, like basically like you're building a sound test in a weird way, where there's a record player inside of your house that will play any of the records that you found. Mine is playing. I think it might be the default. I don't know. I don't remember changing it, but it seems to be playing the like a mostly a cappella version of the DK rap, which works out okay. It's a really wonderful game. It feels like its own thing. It doesn't feel like a reskinned Mario game. It doesn't feel like they just made this game, but now you have these moves instead, but it's still this game. Like you see elements of Odyssey here and there in some of the structure and some of the ways that you're unlocking items or whatever. The clothing in particular. But it's it very much feels like its own thing. And it's really great. It's just a really great time. And just I don't know, man. It's just like it's just a very smart It's just a very smart take on the platforming genre, I think, because it's not, like Odyssey, had its like platforming challenges, and this will have challenges where you have to drop in and these almost like shrines, like a Zelda shrine type of situation, and some of them are combat focused and some of them are more platformy or puzzle focused or whatever, and they hide extra bananas in some of those areas. And so you kind of have to look around and go like, well, I know there's 3 bananas here. I know I get 1 for finishing this thing, and there's 1 along the way, but I know there's 1 somewhere else. And so it's an opportunity for you to kind of explore a little bit and do stuff. And it's really neat. It's a really cool implementation of a lot of ideas and things that initially, like I said, there's an initial sense when you start playing the game of just like, this almost seems broken, but it's broken in ways that are very much there to benefit you and very much work out. And yeah, it's a great time. Again, I think if you're looking for something that has like nonstop challenge from minute 1, this is not that. This is a pretty straightforward, breezy, I would say, kind of adventure. I found myself warping back to previous areas just to go get more bananas, even though you don't really need them. I was like, like I didn't want to make my kids had gone to bed, and I was like, well, I want to play some more. I don't necessarily want to make a ton of progress when they're not here because they're having a good time watching it. So I just kind of went back to the first world and just, with the larger sonar range and some of the other stuff I had at my disposal, I was like, I'm going to go get more fossils. I'm going to go buy some. I bought some fur colors for them while they were asleep and all of that. But it's a really good time. It's this, and they do a good job of like, if you kind of have to dig in a little bit to find it, but you can go and find a fat list of every banana in the game, and you see just how many bananas are in each layer of the game, and it's crazy. You're like, man, I feel like I've been punching the crap out of this world. Surely I have found most of the bananas here. And then you look at the list and you're like, there's like 40 more bananas here. What the hell is going on? Like, what is going on? It's really crazy. But yeah, it's a very nice, very breezy time. It's a really kind of wonderful thing that I think is absolutely worth checking out. It's nice to finally have a good Nintendo Switch 2 game that is, I suppose, exclusive to the system. And because it doesn't really need I don't like the D-pad on the Pro controller. I felt the same way about the first one. This second one also doesn't seem fantastic, but this is not a game where you need the D-pad, and so it's been fine to play with a Pro controller. And yeah, it's a really good time. If you bought it, well, it's a dumb it's a really dumb like the recommendation is really silly. If you have a Nintendo Switch 2, you should get it. You should get this second game that exists for the platform. Like, yeah, I don't think you needed a review to know, like, man, I bought this thing. I better get something so I can use it. Yeah, you should probably get it. But yeah, it's you were probably going to get it anyway, but it's fantastic. Is it a system seller? Someone in chat asked. That's a crazy question at this point because the costs of everything and involved, and is it worth it to you to spend $500 on a copy of Donkey Kong Bonanza? I think it's a wonderful video game. I think it is extremely worth playing. Should you run out and buy a Switch 2 to play it? I don't know. If you're on the fence about the Switch 2 in general and you're just like waiting for more games, I think that's something where you could maybe wait a bit longer. The thing I would say, I think the recommendation with where I'm at right now is, hey, when and if you decide to buy a Switch 2, this is a game you should certainly play on it. Because it's extremely worth playing, and it's a hell of a time. So So yeah. Let's take another break. We'll come back and we'll get into the news after this. This last week, Rocket Money saved me another $40 on one of my bills. I was checking out the app. It was like, hey, there was a big expense. You might want to take a look at this. And as I was taking a look at it, it was like, hey, by the way, you got this phone bill you might be able to save a little bit of money on. I was like, go to it. And so you enter some details about your phone, your account information and let them go to work. And I don't know, it was maybe a little bit less than a week. They came back and said like, yo, we saved you $40. I was like, right on. Yes, that's great. That's perfect. Rocket Money is good like that. They've saved me hundreds of dollars now. Between, different bills that I'm kind of paying too much for. It's also a really good way to just kind of get a kind of bird's eye view of like, here's your finance situation. Here's money in, money out, all of the different subscriptions that you have in your life, recurring charges. So you can just get a sense of like, hey, what's really going on here? What's really going on every month? And then, if you want to cancel those subscriptions for a lot of those subscriptions, you can have Rocket Money go and do that for you too. If you're using the app's premium features, they will go to bat for you on all of that stuff, negotiating lower bills, canceling all your stuff. You'll get alerts if your bills increase in price, all of that stuff. It's really, really handy. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Plus, hey, if you've got unusual activity in your accounts and, if you've set a budget and you're close to going over it, it'll let you know. It'll let you know like, hey, you got your next money's not hitting this account for another couple weeks. And you're at this point, you might want to take a look at that. Rocket Money's 5 million members have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, with members saving up to $740 per year when they use all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/JeffG today. That's rocketmoney.com/JeffG. Again, that's rocketmoney.com/JeffG. No, wrong button. Oh my God. What the heck? Pornography. You know it. You love it. It's pornography, but pornographic video games? We've come a long way since the bleeps and bloops of Beat 'em and Eat 'em. And Valve has removed a substantial number of adult video games from the Steam platform. They have added a new rule in their onboarding guide, according to gamingonlinux.com, who, tracks Valve and obviously tracks, for Steam Deck purposes and so on. And a number of games here, they have a screenshot of things that have been removed from the store. Including DLC and stuff. We've got here, what do we have? Interactive Sex, Futanari Incest, Episode 1. Interactive Sex, Incest Twins, Episode 1. Interactive Sex, Futanari Incest, BDSM. Redemption of Lee Wei. All of these products have been removed from Steam. Valve has, I believe, since gone on record and confirmed that, part of their update on the Steamworks, on the kind of onboarding side, is content that might violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related card networks and banks, or internet network providers, in particular, certain kinds of adults-only content. That is under the heading, What You Shouldn't Publish on Steam. And so Steam is the latest to kind of succumb to this. This has been ongoing. These sort of pressure campaigns get laid onto the payment processors and credit card companies by a bunch of religious zealot, right-wing, anti-porn crusaders that go out there and try to organize these campaigns. And so there is some Australian group that I think has taken credit for this particular maneuver. I think this was something that was probably going to happen sooner rather than later. This is something that, whether it's Google for SEO or whether it's the people that process the credit cards, there is this sort of frustrating push to block pornography in a lot of situations, or even just like adult content in a general sense. This is something that a lot of platforms like Patreon have had to kind of wrestle with over the years, in terms of like, well, what do they allow, what don't they allow, and finding the rules for this sort of content and where it can and can't exist. I think Steam did a pretty good job of allowing that stuff on the platform, finding controls in there that allowed you to block it if you didn't want to see it, and so on. And I thought it was actually kind of nice in a way that these products could just kind of exist on these clients, in these storefronts and stuff, because it's ultimately that none of that stuff it's just kind of not a big deal. As long as the appropriate kind of age gating and that sort of stuff is in place, if adults want to see this stuff, who am I? Who am I to say no? That's sort of how I've always viewed that stuff. Again, this is someone in chat said, well, Valve is big enough that they should just start their own payment like, this isn't, as people have been going through this, like, Apple doesn't process their own payments. Like, they work with a payment processor. Like, that is not a thing you can just do without substantial, like, Valve might not actually be big enough to do that thing. It's frustrating. I don't necessarily, I don't know. It does. You don't have to pass judgment on like if you're into this particular thing or not. And there are still some adult games on the service, so this is not a blanket thing. It is kind of just some specific stuff that I think that they went after. But I would not be shocked if this kind of eventually kind of pushed further in that direction, right? That's typically how this goes. Like, people find these groups. Censorship groups find that they can have some headway on this and try to apply pressure wherever they can. And I think that's unfortunate. There was, as a side, there was sort of a side thing here where Vice, whatever Vice is these days, which Vice they relaunched the Waypoint brand not that long ago with none of the Waypoint people. And it just, I don't know. I guess I'm always going to have a point of view on that, having known the people who launched Waypoint. But like there was reporting there on this topic and on some of the groups that had been pushing for this sort of stuff. And it sounds like that the people that own Vice now, which is some fucking hellscape venture capital fucking nightmare company, of course, because of course, that they kind of demanded that the articles get taken down, which led to people resigning from, again, whatever Waypoint, like freelance writers and stuff, saying they're not going to write for them anymore, which is a different thing, I suppose, than resigning from the site entirely. But that there's been fallout there as well. But yeah, the whatever scumbag company owns Vice now. I don't know. I guess, that's unfair to say, because when you think about it, Vice was founded as a scumbag company. It's just a different type of scumbag now. Or is it? Maybe it actually is kind of the same type of scumbag. We can do like a scumbag breakdown a different day, maybe. But yeah, I think this is unfortunate because I do think that there's something kind of interesting about, you know, like allowing this stuff to exist and allowing for adult games to exist in a sense. I have not found, the other thing I will say, and this is a separate, this doesn't mean I think they should be pulled down, but I don't think I've played one game with an adult tag on Steam that was actually good. maybe I just don't know how to pick them. Boobs, for example, is available on Steam for free. If you want to remove the top so that you can see the boobs, it's like $3.99. And you control a hand. And it's just like you just see a lady's torso, like it was Dead Island, and and you just kind of you can just move this hand around, and so you're just like, and you can kind of go like this, you can kind of crunch up your hand, but it's just you're just kind of like smacking these boobs back and forth, and so it's this very stupid physics thing of just slapping these boobs around, and as you're doing it, it's like why is this? What is happening here? But yeah, it's Lady Killer in a Bind. I guess I don't consider Lady Killer in a Bind to be an adult product. That's just a cool story. I guess technically okay. All right, if we want to, nothing wrong with that. That's just a neat game. But yes. Boobs is available on. I think that's still there. I think you can still check out Boobs, and it's free if you just want to see the bikini thing. I will say, not to review Boobs here, but to review Boobs here, I would not go down the rabbit hole of buying the DLC and revealing the boobs. I don't think it's worth it. I think if you want to see polygonal nipples, there's just I don't know. There's a billion places to see that stuff. Go or look at video of the real ones. You have opportunities for that sort of stuff. You still get the idea. If you use a controller instead of the mouse, you get two hands because you get one on each analog stick, but you can't move them as fast. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it kind of misses the point, I think. It's like, it's nice to have two hands, but you can't like blah, 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 back and forth. And so, it's just kind of, I don't know, feels like a big waste of time if you ask me. And then there are a bunch of like counters and numbers in there that are like, I did not figure out how to make the numbers go up in Boobs, but there are a bunch of Steam achievements. All right, I don't want to talk about Boobs anymore. The game, I guess I should specify. Atari. You heard of these guys? Asteroids, Missile Command, like this sort of thing. Atari has partnered with Namco on a couple of different projects here that are pretty interesting. If you think back, Namco didn't always have a presence in the US market. And so Namco, much like Capcom in the early arcade days, they would license their games out for US distribution. And so Pac-Man was not released in the United States by Namco, it was released by Midway. Dig Dug was not released in arcades by Namco in the United States, it was released by Atari. They licensed it to Atari for distribution in the US. Over time, that would change. Namco would eventually establish a U.S. presence of its own, and like Namco Home Tech would exist, and we'd go into the 90s, and all of that would kind of change. For home versions of those games, there was usually a separate licensing deal in place, and so you would have these situations where, let's see, for example, I believe Sega published the home versions of Spy Hunter, which was made by Midway. I believe there's a Sega logo on at least one version of Spy Hunter. And Pac-Man, the home rights to Pac-Man were acquired by Atari, along with Dig Dug and along with Donkey Kong in some cases. Coleco published the Donkey Kong version for the Atari 2600. Atari did a version for its 8-bit home machines. I believe Atari also did like the Apple II version of the game because they had a separate label called Atari Soft that was specifically there to make, because they were acquiring the rights to these games. They wanted to put it on as many different computers as possible. And so you'd have situations where Atari Soft would be the publisher of record for the Commodore and Apple versions of these games, and all of that. Not unlike the way that, like, I don't know, like PlayStation publishes on Xbox, but they call it PlayStation Publishing, but a little more obfuscated even than that, I suppose. Anyway, what I'm saying is that there is a legacy when it comes to Namco's games existing on Atari's platforms. Things like Galaxian, and Galaga, and Xevious, and Pac-Man, and so forth. Dig Dug. Obviously, that's kind of ancient history, but now Atari and Namco are kind of reuniting in a couple of different ways to kind of honor or exploit, maybe is the right word, some of this legacy. They are issuing a Pac-Man edition of the Atari 2600 Plus. You may remember I covered that when it came out. The Atari 2600 Plus looks like a 2600. It is, I believe it is FPGA based, but whatever. Either way, it is not, the innards are not real hardware per se, but it has HDMI and hooks up to your TV. It will also run Atari 7800 games if you stick them in there, and it'll run real cartridges. And so they went and they sold new real cartridges in some of these cases with some new games to go alongside the release of the 2600 Plus. They're going to sell a new Pac-Man version of this 2600 Plus that is bright frickin' yellow. And so it's a bright frickin' yellow Atari 2600, which looks extremely fucking sick. On the front of the 2600, they have put Pac-Man and the 4 ghosts and some dots. They will also be they sell a wireless version, I guess, of maybe it's not wireless, but the original, yeah, it is wireless. The original 2600 joystick, they made a wireless version of that to ship alongside the 2600 Plus. And those come in the colors of Pac-Man and the 4 different ghosts. And so they're selling like insane packages where it's like, if you want all 5 of these joysticks and the 2600 and a combo cartridge that has multiple versions of Pac-Man on it, you can give us like $500 and you can do it. And you're like, okay, this is starting to stretch the. This is maybe a little much, but it is. They all look really cool. It's all really cool looking stuff. They're going to be selling here. The bundle, the console will come with it's a cartridge they're calling Pac-Man Double Feature, and it's going to come with the Atari, like I guess an Atari 7800 version of Pac-Man, and also the original Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man. This is where a lot of this analogy really, like the thing they're going for, kind of breaks down for me a little bit. I don't know if you've seen the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man before. It is fucking terrible. Like it is funny to go back to. I played a bunch of it yesterday in the wake of this story. It is a miserable version of the original game. The color palette, the audio, like it is iconic in its badness. Everyone knew back then that this was a dog shit version of this game. It is something that you could look at and go like, yeah, did this contribute to the crash of console gaming in the US? Like, yeah, maybe kind of, maybe a little bit. This disappointing version of Pac-Man definitely didn't help. But the audio is great. If you've ever watched a television show where they've had kids playing a video game in the background, half the time it's fucking Pac-Man for 2600 for some weird reason. Just the audio, they just pull that and it's great. And so I think it's really like what they should have done, if you are truly honoring Atari and Namco's classic partnership on these 2600 versions of Namco's games, the console shouldn't be arcade Pac-Man yellow. It should be like whatever sickly color Pac-Man was in the 2600 game. And the graphics on the front should be the 2600 graphics. Like, why are you running from this legacy? I thought we were here to honor it. You made it all look too good. You're selling joysticks in these 5 colors. The ghosts in the 2600 version of that game are not different colors. I feel like they should do a separate, even more limited edition version of this that truly honors the true legacy of Pac-Man on the Atari 2600. Now they're also they're offering a collection of cartridges for this thing that is a handful of different Namco games. Like you'll get a version of Xevious. There's a 2600 version of Xevious. Dig Dug was actually decent on the 2600 for what it was. And yeah, they are also going to release a new pack of DLC for Atari 50. Atari 50, if you don't remember, was the Digital Eclipse documentary, playable documentary with all of these different games from Atari's history and interviews and different documents about all of that process and everything. For $8, I guess, they're going to add a new wing to that documentary with new interviews and new content in it, along with Pac-Man, Galaga, Dig Dug, Xevious, and Galaxian, I believe. Some of those will be arcade versions. I believe Xevious, you will get the arcade version and the 2600 version. But some of them will just be the 2600 version, if I remember right, from the press release here. That's really cool. I think there's something really crazy about the idea of like a documentary thing getting DLC that includes kind of new documentary stuff. But again, like these are really important games in the story of the Atari 2600. Pac-Man is a huge part of that. And so it's really neat. It's really neat that is something that is going to happen. That'll be out later this year as DLC for Atari 50. I'm looking forward to seeing what that ends up being. And man, I already have an Atari 2600 Plus. I don't need another one. I don't need one. But this yellow, this there's something about. I always have loved the look of the Atari 2600. It's such a cool, weird box, and the idea that it is big, bright, crazy Pac-Man yellow is really cool. There'll be multiple versions of Pac-Man in that collection too. I believe you're going to end up with the game I always kind of envisioned. This is my canonical home version of Pac-Man. It's the version that came out for the Atari home computers, which is also the same version that came out for the 5200. Just that you got to use better controllers. That's that version of the game. We lived near a supermarket, and so a lot of receipts and trash were always blowing up on our lawn. And one day I found $100 bill on our lawn, and then I used that. My parents said I could get a video game, and I got the Atari 800 version of Pac-Man. And that's a weird version of the game in its own right. They stretch the maze out to fill the 4x3 display, and but it is a significantly better version of the game than the one that appeared on the 2600, which I didn't see until kind of years after the fact. But yes, this is a really cool collection. It's really, this is now 2 weeks in a row. Like I am literally wearing the Bounty Bob t-shirt that we talked about last week. I bought one. I don't like shirts. I wish more shirts would just put the big logo on the front. I am not a pocket logo. This is a pocket logo, big logo on the back shirt, and I'm not a big fan of that because, people wear jackets and stuff. And so I like the logo big on the front. That's just me. And so that's frustrating a little bit, but I knew that going in. Anyway, I really appreciate that Atari has found a really interesting way to tap into so many different parts of its legacy. Not just the parts that it owned and controlled either. Like the idea that they're going out and doing this deal with Namco, this is the sort of thing that gets lost to time all the time, right? The weird business dealings of oh, well, yeah, Atari did these versions of the game, but they don't own them anymore because they were licensed by Namco and this, and so you'll never see them again. No, now we get to see them again. They found a way to do business to kind of bring this stuff out one more time. And I think that's fantastic. I think and again, the Bounty Bob stuff and finding ways to approach games that were not initially owned by Atari. It's more than just so many of these things, like the Intellivision stuff when they were bringing that the Intellivision stuff, which now Atari owns that too. So much when it comes to IP catalogs and back catalogs of video games, it is so often just, well, what do we got? What can we do as cheaply as possible, as easy as possible? What's the dumbest? What can we do with these old games? Can we put them out again? Great. And this feels like this is Atari going out and making things happen outside of just the games they own, and not just well, I don't know, Tempest. We got Battlezone. Is Battlezone ours? Can we put out? Let's put Battlezone out again. Or let's do this, or let's license this, or we're gonna do a new version of Asteroids, or I think it's really awesome that that Atari is trying to do more. They're doing fun, cool stuff. Now, the price on some of this stuff, I think, again, if you just want the console with one controller, it's $170, which for a device that hooks up to a TV and runs genuine Atari 2600 and 7800 cartridges, that's that's a specific purpose that you might need. And that's kind of cool that you can do that if you've got the real cartridges and you don't just want to run Stella on any device that will run Stella, or you have some Mr. FPGA based solution of your own or whatever. But if you want to do a real cartridge kind of thing, you can do that, and I think that's kind of cool. I don't know, but they have a bunch of I'm loading up their site here because some of the pricing gets kind of crazy. Okay, so the collection of cartridges I was talking about earlier, there are 7,800 games. So they're going to sell a pack that comes with Galaga, Dig Dug, Xevious, and the Pac-Man double feature cartridge that they're packing in with the console itself. Okay, so these are all pre-orders. I guess they're opening pre-orders tomorrow for this stuff. And some of it is limited. Some of it is only going to be at Comic-Con. They're doing gold box versions of what, they're doing some strange stuff. But if you want everything, if you want the console, all 5 colored joysticks, and those 7,800 copies of Dig Dug, Xevious, Galaga, and the Pac-Man thing, they want $434.92. I mean, I feel like they know their market, right? They know oh yeah, we're selling this to fucking old dudes. So yeah, we can hit them for 400 and change. And if they're big enough weirdos, they're gonna get it. And I look at it and go it would be kind of cool that, but I don't. Again, as someone who already has a black one, I don't know. And it's, if I were into decorating a room with video game shit, if I were the type of person that was like really dedicated to like, I'm going to make the ultimate gamer paradise, like all that other dumb shit, this would actually be something I would get for that, but I would get this stuff and just hang it on the wall. It'd be like, here's 5 Atari 2600 joysticks in Pac-Man colors. Like that, I don't know. That's just cool. That's a cool look no matter what. And the console itself is pretty cool looking too. I don't know, man. It's like they almost have me. I'm like on the going like, it's pretty cool looking. But I don't there's no new gameplay that I get as part of any of that. So the Atari 50 DLC will be the thing that I probably sink my teeth into. And yeah, there's what do they have here? It's some kind of limited, 1,000 limited edition Pac-Man double feature cartridges that they will have at Comic-Con, at San Diego Comic-Con. Comes in a gold box, and the cartridge color is one of 5 colors. And they also have a patch that is... It's weird because it's a patch that is the same basic size as the Activision patches, but like it's for Pac-Man, and it says Chomp Champion on it, which that's a good. God damn it, that's a good looking. It's a good looking patch. It's a good looking patch. What are you gonna do? It's a good looking patch. They got a booth at Comic-Con. They're near Pokemon, apparently. If you're going, it's a neat looking gold box. I don't know. I would not. I don't need that in my life, but it's a neat looking gold box. Warframe. They had TennoCon. Yet again. TennoCon persists no matter what. And they showed some details of the kind of upcoming future of Warframe. They also, I signed up for it and did not actually launch it to play it, but I think there was during TennoCon, if you signed up for Soulframe, the other game that they're working on, they would let you into whatever kind of limited Soulframe thing they're doing. Hopefully that still works. I don't know. I haven't had time to look at it. IGN picked up on something they said along the way as part of the... They did a kind of press Q&A talking about Warframe a little bit, and someone asked, like, hey, how come, what, is this game coming to Switch 2 or what? And the answer from Steve Sinclair, who is the CEO of Digital Extremes, the developer of Warframe, said his response, according to IGN, was, our tech team is so excited to take advantage of the high-speed cores and the other really cool features of it. There's just such a backlog for dev kits. So yeah, if you know anyone, just one, that's all it would take. And so they don't have dev kits. So, I feel like we've heard kind of somewhat conflicting things about dev kit availability for the Switch 2. But here, this is pretty hard confirmation here that Digital Extremes, Warframe is not a small game. In my view, I don't know. But they don't have one. And so he went on to say, I know programmers are just like, oh, I can't wait. We definitely have plans. When we get a dev kit, we will be doing a custom build for Warframe. Absolutely. Which is kind of crazy. That this has been, the system's been out for a little bit now, and that dev kits still hadn't worked their way around. I had heard that dev kits were in like decent supply, but I guess most of the people I was talking to were at studios that got dev kits. And so I know like disclosure on the platform and when different companies got told about it, that obviously is a much different situation, and they're the short list of developers that they're going to read in early because of how secretive they were about the Switch 2 and all of that, like that's naturally going to be a shorter list. But now that it's out, I I guess I would have thought that like once it was out, they would have been like, okay, now we don't have to have you come. We don't have to go to your studio and like, hey, we don't need to meet in a room with no windows so that I can take this out of a locked briefcase and show it to you. Like, you know what it is already. You have consumer units probably. And so now we can just kind of send you the dev kit and the SDKs and whatever you need to kind of get up and running. But it sounds like that's something that has been taking some time as well. Obviously, the hardware itself is, you know, it has not been impossible to find a Switch 2, I guess I would say. Like, they've been restocking here and there from the look of things. But for whatever reason, dev kits have maybe not followed, and I don't know what the holdup is there. Like, that could be something that is very well held up by whether it was the kind of past tariff situation, the current potentially upcoming tariff situation, or just somewhere in the middle of all that. They had to decide like, oh, if we bring dev kits into the country, we have to value them at X number of dollars and then pay a tariff on top of the thousands of dollars we would value a dev kit at over a consumer unit or whatever. Because it is more than just a consumer unit with different firmware on it. Like, there's more to it than that. And so it's sort of, yeah, I wonder if that ended up being part of the holdup, is that all of that tariff stuff happened near the end. Oh, yeah, that's right. Digital Streams is Canadian. Huh. So Nintendo Canada would be the ones to potentially handle something like that. Well, yeah. I don't have a good answer to this one. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out like what would be the issue here. I know that like a lot of the disclosure in North America probably happened through the US and maybe not necessarily through Canada. I don't know what Nintendo's Canadian operation actually looks like these days, and how much actual development related work or how much third party work. I imagine that a lot of the third party stuff is run out of Washington. Like run out of the US. So Nintendo Canada may not be the company that would handle all of that stuff. Interesting. I don't know. I would think that, and maybe I'm wrong on the numbers, but I would think that Warframe has, you know, been a thing that's done well enough on Switch that they would want to have a Switch 2 version of it or whatever, but and want to kind of sew that up, but maybe Nintendo doesn't value that relationship as much as I don't know. I'm not sure what the exact situation would be there that would prevent them from getting dev kits. Fangfastic says, having watched a bunch of dev streams, it's entirely possible they just forgot to ask. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. Shit happens. Yeah, I suppose anything is possible. But yeah, I don't know. That is sort of strange, and you don't really hear companies coming out and saying that shit in public all that often. But that's the magic of TennoCon. Speaking of companies getting out and saying things in public, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot, I'm never going to feel comfortable that I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Probably because I'm not, but what are you going to do? He was addressing shareholders in a recent Q&A, according to IGN.com. And you know, like, kind of talked about the underwhelming performance of sales performance, specifically of Star Wars Outlaws, and he pinned it on the IP, which I thought was interesting. He said, the quote here is, Outlaws was released at a time when the brand that it belonged to was in a bit of choppy waters, which sure. I guess yeah, Star Wars had, you know, like they took a break. They canceled a bunch of Star Wars stuff, television shows and whatever else. Like they did Like, yeah, I think you could say that like Star Wars was not doing super great at the moment at which that game was released. I might also say that game launched rough. That much like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, it had a rough launch technically and needed a little bit of work. And then they went on and made larger changes to the early parts of Star Wars Outlaws because people were complaining about some of the stealth stuff in that game that I don't even necessarily like stealth games, but I never had an issue with the early parts of that game. It sounds like some people really did. And maybe that was kind of what soured people on that game, was the word of mouth surrounding some of that stuff. I do feel like Star Wars Outlaws got done dirty for whatever reason, whether it was just like people were a little burned out on Star Wars or whatever, and Ubisoft, didn't really help its own cause there with some of the technical issues it had at launch and so on. But that's a very good game. Star Wars Outlaws is a hell of a video game. It's like really fun characters and fun story, and like I think there are aspects of it later on that get like a little bit repetitive, but they built some really nice worlds and give you some really, like, there's just exciting stuff to do in that game. As someone who doesn't give a particular fuck about the Star Wars IP and where it is, like that was certainly not a problem for me. Like, oh, people don't like Star Wars. Like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't really liked Star Wars since, I don't know, 1983. So whatever. It's a hell of a game. It deserved better than it got. People got super fucking weird about it for a handful of reasons. And I don't know, like it had weird word of mouth, I think, because of some of that stealth. And then they eventually patched it. So I don't know. I think that, him just kind of like hand waving all of that other stuff away is maybe a little disingenuous, but also he's not necessarily wrong that like at that particular point in time that Star Wars, the property, was kind of in sort of a whatever kind of place. But I had a wonderful time with that game. I felt that was a really great game. And was weirded out by the reaction to it. By people not, it seemed like this seems like exactly what you would want. It's like a brand new story in the Star Wars thing. These characters seem pretty good and fun. There are factions to play against each other, here and there. Like, it's got some decent space combat stuff. Like, that stuff was maybe... I found myself in a couple of difficulty spikes around like, oh, I need to have the right upgrades to make sure I can get through these quests. And I fucked up a couple of things because I was not well equipped for them and whatever. But also, the game was crashing on me quite a bit early on as well. Like, that was kind of for me, that was the problem with Star Wars Outlaws. And once that got to a point where that stopped on PC, it was basically fine. But yeah, I don't know. That's a neat game. I think like next time it's on some kind of deep discount, you should probably give it a look. We will get our first official look, or I guess our next official look. No, this will be our first official look at Battlefield 6, which is officially the name of the new Battlefield game. They're going to be putting out some kind of a reveal trailer, they are calling it, on the 24th, which is later this week. And the game is set to be out before March of next year, based on some of their financial talk. We were talking a little bit about some of the weapon class stuff that people have been getting all up in arms about like, oh, you need to make sure that the signature weapons are locked to a class, and then them saying, no, we're not going to do that. And me, the somewhat more casual fan of the Battlefield game, saying, yeah, you need to not do that. You need to let me have maximum amount of choice in here to make sure that I can just like kind of play it my way and have fun and not be locked into sniper rifles and bullshit I don't want to use. And so it sounds like that at this point in the beta, they are gonna split the difference and go like, oh, on official servers they'll be locked one way, and on other servers they can be locked the other way. Which sounds like the softest, limpest, weakest fucking way to go. Have a fucking backbone. If you guys believe in this shit, fucking do it. Be game developers and just fucking make a decision and go, no, this is better for the game. Instead of, what up, fam? We've heard your feedback and we're taking it really seriously about the weapons balance, fam. And, you know, we're all friends here, right? We want to... And, you know, whatever. But this is something that they're going to doing in the beta. And so maybe that'll be a thing that eventually just ends up going one way or the other by the time the game is done. But that sounds like where they're going to go with it. And yeah, I imagine it must be really hard to be making a Battlefield game in this day and age after the way the last handful of them went, that you get extra skittish, about community reaction and all of this stuff. You're like, oh God, people are mad about the guns in the game. Instead, someone who's been there for a long time, which probably doesn't happen anymore because they all got laid off, but someone who's been there long enough should be like, yeah, back in my day, we went from selling weapons to giving them away to people if they signed up for a newsletter, because there was a backlash about some weapon DLC that we were looking to do. And then, you know, the kids on the team would look at you and go, what? People were mad about selling things in a video game? And then you say, yeah, but don't worry about it. We captured all of their data instead, and that was far more valuable than the $4 we were going to get for those dumb fucking guns. And the community celebrated it like it was a success. What a bunch of fucking morons, right? Ha ha, we got them. Ugh. And lastly in the news, Mortal Kombat 2, the movie. They put out a trailer for that film, very focused on Johnny Cage, almost kind of painting him as the main character who is somehow going to save the world in this sequel, which I don't know. I don't know if I believe in Johnny Cage to that degree, but I think that the casting Carl Urban as Johnny Cage, I think works well enough for this kind of like grizzled, down on his luck version of Johnny Cage that they have that they have tapped into for the past couple of games even. Yes, Colonel Sanders 21 in the chat with the question, the one question on everyone's lips. This was the first question I asked upon watching the trailer. Where is Cole? Where is Cole, the MMA fighter turned hero that they created for the first Mortal Kombat movie? Where is that guy? What happened to that guy? Are they just going to show him in the first few minutes of the movie and he's going to be like, I'm a family man now, and he's going to be with his kids and he's not going to fight? Like, what is that about? What's up with that? Was he in the trailer? Okay, Mr. Duck Sauce in the chat says he was in the trailer. I didn't see him on the cast list, but okay. Okay. Yeah, maybe he ends up dying in the very beginning and that's why they have to go find Johnny Cage or something weird like that. I don't know. That first Mortal Kombat movie, of this rebooted Mortal Kombat movie, was all right. It was pretty okay. It was a good time. You know? Like the sort of thing that's like it's kind of better than it had any right to be. And I think that the way that they like the character creating in Cole, the new character that they created to be the centerpiece of this movie, I think works, you know, for reasons of like, you know, you need to have someone in this that looks around and goes, what? This guy's got 4 arms? What the fuck is going? Like, you need an audience insert character that can think all of this shit is crazy and ask all the exposition questions that the movie needs answered, because it is ostensibly the first one in this new franchise or whatever. So I think that works pretty well. But you don't need that anymore because this is a sequel. So you can kill him off and say like, oh, you know, he's a guy that maybe would have been Johnny Cage in a different version of this script. And now we're just going to put Johnny Cage in it. Fuck it. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like they're having fun with it. And it's a good looking trailer. The movie's out October 24th. So I want to see that. I liked that first one just fine. Like it's within reason. There's no need to oversell the quality of the first Mortal Kombat movie. It's good. It's fine. You know, it's a good time. It's like a good 90 and 2 hours, whatever. You know, it's like you can watch it and be like, yeah, cool, man. Check this movie out. Sure, dude. And I think, you know, a lot of that ends up being because of, you know, they made those other movies that were terrible. Well, they made the Mortal Kombat Armageddon is a miserable fucking film. A terrible fucking movie. Just absolute fucking shit. The first Mortal Kombat movie it's okay. I was not satisfied with the Mortal Kombat movie when it came out. I watched it and went like, all right. When I went to go see Mortal Kombat Armageddon, the friend I went to go see it with walked out of the theater in the first like 15 minutes and then waited in the lobby for me to finish. He was like, I can't fucking do this, man. And he just got up and walked out. Yeah. Yeah, so that's out October 24th. I'm looking to see what is going on with Splitgate 2 because some people in the chat were saying that this sounds like a fucking hey, guess what? Splitgate 2. A real mess. They are, well, let's see here. IGN and a few different outlets are reporting on some of this stuff. They are going to go back to calling the game a beta. Let's see. Maybe this will be easier if I just find if they've got a post on Steam or something like that. All right. They have not posted on their own website about, oh yeah, no, here it is. Building the Splitgate you deserve. We've heard your feedback and we agree with you. We launched too early. We bit off more than we can chew. We rushed certain features, made some boneheaded mistakes, and didn't give you the polished porta-filled mayhem. So we're going back to beta. We'll be heads down until early next year, rebuilding major parts of the game to capture the spirit of what made Splitgate special. That means reworking progression from the ground up, adding more portals to our maps, simplifying monetization, refocusing on classic game modes, and more. That means more playtests, more surveys, more listening, and truly being community first. What up, Splitgate fam? We're listening. They are laying off some number of people to give ourselves time to build the Splitgate you deserve. We've made the incredibly difficult decision to reduce certain roles and shift our resources to focus on this rework. This is heartbreaking. These are our teammates and our friends, and they helped build what we have today. They're receiving severance and job placement support, and we're committed to doing everything we can to help them. We hope to bring them back when we can. In an effort to retain as many team members as possible, we're also going to be shutting down the OG Splitgate servers in a month. While we'd love to keep servers online indefinitely, it's cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past couple of years, and we have to prioritize our team. We are exploring the possibility of supporting offline or peer-to-peer matches, and when we return, we plan to have a dedicated experience in Splitgate 2 that delivers on the promise of the original. In the meantime, Splitgate 2 will remain playable and will still be shipping Chapter 3 as well as fixes and high priority changes. We love this game and we love this community too much to ever quit, so we won't. Yeah. They raised a fucking lot of money. Well, back in 2021, they raised $100 million. And that was, part of the process of like, okay, Splitgate 1 is a big deal and we need to make a better game. And so we're going to try to make Splitgate 2 instead of just supporting Splitgate 1. But they raised a lot of money. And this TechCrunch article from 2021 around it has like quotes that if you read them, you're like, oh God, these guys are. Co-founder and CEO Ian Proul credited a dedicated community and, as he described it, taking a Silicon Valley approach to running a game business. Cool. Wow, buddy. Cool. Here's another quote from him. 5 years ago, it was very hit-driven. You spend years developing a product, put all this money into hyping the launch, and then hope it's a success. Our process was, there's no way we can take that risk. If we spent our entire budget and got it wrong, we're out of business. So we thought, let's do a soft launch, put it out there and see what happens. Learn, listen, look at the data. Why would I spend money marketing a product that I have no idea about whether it will be a success? If we wanted to spend money and we didn't have a lot, I'd rather spend it on a product that has great metrics and KPIs. What a cool dude. I bet he's so fun to work for. He's just a fun dude. He just want, yeah, man, we just want to bring shooters back. Call of Duty suck. Like, clowns. Sad that folks are going to be losing their jobs over this kind of bungled launch. This seems like something that could have gone differently. I think there were people that, Splitgate fans and people who, are open to the idea of another fucking good shooter were kind of pulling for this game, and they squandered every bit of goodwill they had in a variety of ways, from the shipping game and so on down, I don't think they're going to get a third crack at this. That's my guess. They already did their raise. They already got all their funding, unless like people in chat are saying, like, I thought I'd heard this too, that this guy's dad is the co-founder of Intuit, the TurboTax company. Maybe dad could kick in another 100 mil or something, right? 45 employees, according to IGN, are going to be laid off as a part of this. They took a gigantic risk by putting Splitgate 2 out in the first place, and not just supporting Splitgate 1 and supporting the success that they had found in Splitgate 1. The idea that they're going to be able to kind of go dark on updates for a game that has already made people kind of angry about where Splitgate is at. I feel like especially when they said we're going to fix first person shooters by making a battle royale, like just the misreading everything about the market and you're looking for great KPIs. Launching a new fucking battle royale out of nowhere, not the fucking thing. It's funny to go back to 2021 and go like, oh, why would I market a thing that doesn't work, to now suddenly, oh, we're going to do some of the worst marketing possible for a thing that is a sequel to a thing that was kind of working. Whoops. I find it very difficult to believe that they will be able to put together a game by early next year. Keep in mind, that's, we are basically 4 months away from 2026 at this point. 5 months away. And so if they're saying they're going to be back in early 2026 with big sweeping changes, I don't know that I don't know that players will give them the benefit of the doubt again. Like, people went with them on this ride from Splitgate 1 to 2 because they were managed to tell a decent story about why they were doing it. And it seemed like a big risk. And you're like, yeah, this is, yeah, we'll see, man. That was a cool idea. But if that cool idea was done bigger and better, like, yeah, I mean, I guess I see where there's an opportunity there. I see why they might have to re-engineer it to make the kind of game that they want to make. But for them to tell that story and then ship the Splitgate 2 that they shipped, which seemed to alienate a lot of that existing fan base, and then their post-release or at release, I guess, because they did their kind of beta launch, and then at Summer Game Fest said, the game's out now. However, the announcement that came along with that was like, yeah, we're going to do this battle royale, like some of the other stuff that they had announced alongside the game. Like, I think further alienated that community. I think their attitude at the Summer Game Fest thing was just gross. I think that was a like a legendary bad performance, like go down in history. Like it's one with like realities attached to it, like when the fucking Peggle guy fucking like jumped on stage at the EA thing, people were like, that fucking goon. When Jamie Kennedy hosted a press conference, it was like, fuck this guy. But this is like, you got up on stage and fucking like managed to further damage goodwill in your game. And like, set the hat bullshit aside. Like, that's dumb, incredibly fucking stupid on its own. But to get up there and like fucking shit talk a bunch of shooters that are way more successful than yours and way more beloved than yours in an attempt to say shooters are broken. Like, they're fucking not, dude. Like, there's some rough patches, and yeah, games come and go because there are entrenched players in the space that are well liked. It's tempting to, it's fun to talk a lot of shit about how fucking Call of Duty is fucking terrible and they do this and that when you're trying to make a game that would rival it. But look at the fucking reality of it. People don't fucking buy and play that game because they hate it. Turns out people fucking like Call of Duty. You can say, I don't like Call of Duty and I think we can do better. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Good on you. But fuck off. Also, fuck off with that shit. Like, it's just stupid. It doesn't make you seem like an edgy challenger brand. You're like, we're going to take these guys down a peg. Like, the game that they were making in Splitgate 2 had almost nothing in common with the type of shooter that Call of Duty is. They appeal to almost two totally different fucking audiences on top of it. Like, it's just boneheaded top to fucking bottom. Also, would you like people to work at your studio someday because you took a bunch of fucking shooters with it, or have a lot of talented people working there that might be looking to make moves down the line or something, and made them think like, oh, that guy fucking sucks. That guy's a piece of shit. I don't want to work for that fucking dick. So yeah, man, just stupid across the board, right? And so the idea that they're gonna like, go dark on the game and then come back next year and expect to have any, like, I can't. Only the people that are so far down the rabbit hole that they don't even realize they are down there are going to be people that go like, yeah, man, we're pulling for you. Like, this seems like something where, like, if you're a Splitgate fan, you're probably like, yeah, I was already on my way out. Like, I wanted to like this game and you are pushing it in the wrong direction. So basically shutting down updates and saying like, wait till next year. Like, no, dude, like, I got other shit to do in my life than sit around here. And like, it just, like, the idea of that working out for them when it already kind of didn't work out for them from the Splitgate 1 to 2 transition. Crazy. And in a competitive space like shooters, like, you benefit from having like a groundswell of people playing your game at launch. And so now you've taken the people that would be the most likely people to be there at your relaunch, the most likely people to form that groundswell, and you've alienated them all over again. And so now you're put in this position where you've got to say, like, we're listening. We're going to make the game you want us to make because we apparently didn't know to do that last time. Fam. What up, Splitgate 2 fam? Yeah, and shutting down the servers for the first game is unfortunate as well, you know, because people did like that game. So I don't like how popular is Splitgate 1 at this point that surely those servers no longer cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to run. Right? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know anything about their infrastructure. Maybe they built it on fucking solid fucking gold quantum computers. Who knows? That's it for the news. But I just, it is very hard to, as someone who played Splitgate 2 at the time of release, I'm like, you know what? There's something to this. Like if they push this in the right direction, it could kind of get there. Like zero faith that they would be able to do that at this point on my part. None. And that is it for the news. Let's get into some emails. Podcast@guard.bike is the email address. Send in some emails. I will look at them and address some of them. That is my promise to you. Cloak Burger writes in and says, Cloak here from New York City. I had a dream last night that Zipper Interactive didn't drop the ball on SOCOM 3 and had incorporated the RPG elements that made the original Modern Warfare so revolutionary. What do you think that would have looked like? Seems like we'd be staring at a very different industry than the one that exists today, but who knows? So yeah, I mean, you know, the part of the success of Call of Duty 4 back in 2007 was that they added XP and leveling up and unlocks and you know, that kind of carrot on a stick action that made it so even when you lost, you still felt like you were winning something. Very smart addition, as it turns out. If SOCOM 3 had those elements, it would still be SOCOM 3. Now, I like SOCOM 3. I think I spent more time with SOCOM 2 than SOCOM 3. And so by the time SOCOM 3 came out, there were already, I don't know, it was like, this game's fine, but it's kind of, you know, like there's more competition entering the space and, you know, things are kind of changing ever so slightly. And SOCOM 3 was not maybe as well regarded, widely speaking, as SOCOM 2. The maps in SOCOM 2 are just better. There's better maps. If they had added, you know, leveling up and that sort of stuff to SOCOM 3, I think that, again, I think that's only one part of the puzzle. The other part you have to remember about Call of Duty 4 is that they really went out of their way and made a game that was very easy for anyone to pick up and play and enjoy. Like, it is very simple to wrap your mind around when it comes to just like, I'm going to run and do this. And, you know, like I'm in this fight, I'm shooting over here. I die, I respawn and do this. SOCOM was a game about not respawning, generally speaking. I need to close a window because they're going to spray stuff. And if it gets in the window, I'm going to stand up and close this window. Okay. SOCOM had downtime between rounds. You know, you would die in SOCOM and you'd have to wait for the next round to start because it was similar to Counter-Strike in that way. And that is not something that was going to last in a dramatically mainstream way. and in a space that was becoming increasingly mainstream, console shooters. And so Call of Duty, they offered a few round-based modes like that, but generally, especially at that time, people were playing Team Deathmatch, they were playing Domination, and that's about it. Then you'd have some some of the other objective modes sprinkled in there as well. But I think that stuff is just as much just as responsible for the success of Call of Duty 4 as its XP. They refined and honed the Call of Duty experience in a way that made it extremely palatable to console players. And made it very easy for anyone to get in there and play it. And SOCOM 3, again, was a much slower paced game, a much more tactical game, a thinking man's shooter, which is not entirely true, but but it was, it was a slower paced game by design. And I think that was the sort of thing that was on its way out at that time. Or rather, like SOCOM 3, I think, was kind of the last gasp of that for at least the SOCOM franchise. I mean, those PSP games or, like SOCOM Confrontation, those aren't necessarily terrible video games, but they did not feel vital in the same way that SOCOM 2 did. SOCOM 2, I think, like the way that I talked about it a little bit with Tony Hawk 3. When we were talking about Tony Hawk 3 and how crazy it was to have an online PlayStation 2 game. In the case of Tony Hawk 3, it was even crazier because Tony Hawk 3 came out before the PlayStation 2 network adapter was available. And so you could get a USB Ethernet adapter, plug it into the front, a third-party weird thing, like Netlink would make it, whatever, Netgear would make that stuff. And just for laptops or whatever, you would plug it into your PS2 and you would get online and play Tony Hawk 3. And it was fucking bananas. SOCOM 2 was more of the, like, here's the, or SOCOM, like the real rollout for the network adapter. And you're like, okay, here's this game that's built for it, and you got your headset, and you should get the network adapter, and you should do this, and you should play. And at the time, that still felt very novel. That still felt very crazy. The very idea that you could do that was rare. Not a lot of games supported the network adapter at the time, and it was a unique experience. And so I had been playing games on PC for years at that point because, Quake 1 was an old game by the time that all happened, right? And Unreal Tournament and all of that other stuff. So like the idea of playing shooters specifically, but like online games in general on a PC was not new or exciting. But for PlayStation 2 owners, especially the ones that forgot to buy a Dreamcast, the very idea of like, yo, you can plug this in and you can play football with someone online, or you can plug all this in, and they made this incredibly weird and highly suspect Resident Evil game, and you can play it with other people online. Was bonkers. For a lot of people, for people that only played games on consoles, the very idea was like a foreign concept. Like, we're gonna make Final Fantasy into a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, and you're like, what's that? What's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game? And PlayStation 2 owners got to find out once they were done making their Play Online login, and then making their Final Fantasy 11 login, and then signing up for the thing and doing all that. That's my story about why I didn't play Final Fantasy 11. Is I got access to the Final Fantasy 11 like beta or whatever that they did. And I had the hard drive, and I had all the stuff necessary to do all of that. And I plugged it all in, and I started installing Final Fantasy 11 and downloading whatever stuff you needed to do, and going through the sign up process. At the same time, I was much like this room is now. It was a situation where I was sitting at a computer, and then the TV with the PlayStation 2 was directly behind me. And so I was doing that over here, and then I was turning around over here and installing what the oh man. It's I can't believe that this is, dude, my brain is a mess. PlanetSide. God, I kept wanting to say PlanetScape, but that's no, like Planescape? No. Ugh. I was trying to install Final Fantasy 11 and then turning around and installing and running PlanetSide 1. Because they were having a beta weekend or whatever. I don't think either game was actually out, but it was a but it was like a beta for and the install for PlanetSide finished first. And so I was over there still trying to create logins and doing all of that other stuff. And then I was over here checking out PlanetSide and being like, holy shit, dude, look at this fucking game. It's crazy. And I was so blown away by PlanetSide 1 that I just never found my way back to the PlayStation 2 behind me for a while. I eventually did try some of that beta and whatever, but didn't, I don't know, like the idea of an MMO on a PS2 was always kind of like, okay, well, I have a USB keyboard and I can plug it in here and I can do this, but like, do I want to do this? I don't know. And a lot of people did, and I thought that was pretty awesome, but I just that never clicked for me. That was like a bridge too far for a console game, I think. But yeah, that's I don't know. I don't think so. My point being, I don't think it's as simple as if, you know, if SOCOM had XP, would it have changed the world? No, I don't think it would have. A better game would have also done it and stolen it, and instead we would, you know, maybe some people would hold the SOCOM franchise in slightly higher regard for that reason, because I think it's largely forgotten today. You know, you've got that handful of people that are still playing it on a private server somewhere, and I love that. I love that that's a thing. But that's rough. That's hard, and it's hard to play on those servers. They're too good. They're too good. Max from New Hampshire writes in and says, I occasionally watch first-person shooter reload montage videos on YouTube. I'm not a gun nut or anything, but there is something so satisfying about the animations and audio put into those things. I especially think the work done on the Modern Warfare reboot is top-tier quality to this day. It's weird. You may not necessarily appreciate something like this in the middle of a gunfight, but developers clearly spend a lot of time on it. Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth the time that they spend on it, because I think even if you're not focusing on it, if it looked bad, you would notice it, because it takes up such a significant percentage of the screen and happens so frequently enough over the course of a game. Like, you see those animations a lot, and so they have to look good. They have to not stick out, and so they spend a lot of time making that stuff really. And yeah, the Modern Warfare reboot, you're right, those reload animations are really fucking good. And I think Battlefield has done maybe more of this than Call of Duty did, but there are some games that will have like the occasional like rare reload animation where like 1 out of every 100 reloads is very deliberately different. And some games have done this more than others, but like, it's such a fucking neat idea to be like, here's a thing that's going to happen and it's going to look different, and out of the corner of your eye, you're going to be like, what the fuck did I just see? I think that's really cool. But yeah, it's you see a lot of those animations, and so they have to look good. Otherwise, I think the whole game would feel slightly cheaper. You would just notice it. It would just stand out, right? G in Kansas. wrote in and said, I went through Resistance Fall of Man for the first time toward the start of the year, working on 100% off and on until around late last month. Though I strove to find things I enjoyed, it turned out to be one of the most aggressively middling games I've ever finished. Story, lack thereof, combat, aesthetics, performance, etc. I understand that it was for a new system that was notoriously difficult to make software for, but looking back on the title as a whole, it confounds me that this was hailed as Sony's Halo, or one of several series to be labeled as such. I'm genuinely curious if I'm missing something that everyone else got around 2006 or 7. I don't know how much online or multiplayer would have added to the experience, of those servers have long since been shut down. It's also something I've wondered about nostalgia factoring into this as well. Having gone through some Halo games for the first time in the last year or two, are there sections of these games and other series of the time where you kind of had to be there? The way I hear many of these franchises discussed, I wonder how much is able to be felt today versus a time that we're not in, or other factors like nostalgia. The term Halo killer is hilarious, right? And it's something that, like, it was rare for the publishers or developers of those games to frame them that way. That was something that was often laid on those games in headlines in magazines. They would go like, we're going to go behind the scenes of Sony's new Halo killer. Epic's new Quake killer. Like, they were using those phrases to sell magazines, right? Or to sell clicks, I guess. We were transitioning at that time. And so it's rare, that's like, this is Mortal Kombat is Midway's Street Fighter killer. Like that type of competitive comparison was something that, again, usually not something that was cooked up by the developers and presented as part of official marketing, by and large. Some developers tried to lean into that. And it, when they do, I think it comes off similarly as Homeboy getting up on stage and talking about how fucking Call of Duty sucks and all these other shooters and Apex Legends is a joke or whatever, like all of that other shit. It comes off the same way. It's just like, fuck you guys. You're making a worse game and trying to, you're creating impossible comparisons here. I don't really put too much stock in the whole like Sony's Halo or any of that horse shit, because it was always dumb. But the rest of it, I at the time I did not think highly of Resistance Fall of Man. I remember playing it and being like, oh, okay, there's the weapons are weird and I guess that's kind of neat, but like this isn't like especially fun to play. In terms of like, I think the sequels did a better job for Resistance. I think, that's a franchise that got better as it went on, but also not that much better. Remember, like you say 2006, 2007. Is that, I'm going to look up the exact release date here. Yeah, 2006. So November 2006 is when that game came out. Now remember, what we were just talking about, that is literally about like a year before the release of Call of Duty 4. And so shooters that kind of like, that's a dividing line in a lot of console shooter stuff, right? You still had Halo existing outside of that comparison, but you saw the rush in 2008 and 9 to try to capitalize on the popularity of Call of Duty. And you saw its influence infect a lot of shooters and a lot of not shooting, some of those mechanics made their way, we talk about Blur, the driving game, as having like Call of Duty leveling system in it and all of that. But shooters specifically, you saw a lot of second tier, third tier, ninth tier shooters coming to console that you just look at and go like, oh, look at this fucking knockoff. Like clearly you wanted to make a Call of Duty game. And there were some downloadable games on PSN. Not Heavy Iron. It was like these really fucking low rent first person shooters that were downloadable games that Heavy Gear Afghanistan, or like, I forget, it's not the name, but it's like that. And they were super bad, except they were kind of like shitty Call of Duty knockoffs. And so they're like, oh, this, you could play this. You shouldn't, but you could. But there's a ton of stuff that came in the wake of that. And so Resistance, the first Resistance, is a game that came out before all of this nonsense started. And so I think in some ways that probably makes it a little bit harder to go back to. The Halo comparison probably makes a little bit more sense at that point. But then, like 2006, like that's a game, remember, that's a game that came out prior to Halo 3. And so I think Halo even kind of further locked in its thing, its Halo-ness, upon the release of Halo 3. Because Halo 2 came out, and when Halo 2 came out, online first-person shooters on console were something of a novelty to begin with, and they had their co-op campaign, and they had all this and that, and people were super mad about the conclusion of the campaign in Halo 2, but it had a lot of really cool stuff going for it campaign-wise, and so that's Resistance. You're right, and just I think it's a fair comparison to make in that case, because that's from an era when shooter campaigns were sort of a different thing. And by the time we got to Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2 and whatever else, like that started to change. The importance of the campaign, the length of the campaign would start to shorten up over time. The replayability of the campaign, campaign feature sets and stuff, like, that stuff started to reduce in favor of more focus on competitive multiplayer. Unless you were specifically going after Halo 3. That's like the same year. Halo 3 and Call of Duty 4, like those shooters in some ways kind of couldn't be more different. But I maintain that I think Halo 3 is where they really hit a really great sweet spot with that game, and some of the stuff that Bungie did after that is fantastic. Reach and ODST, namely. And then the whole thing gets weird again with, kind of the 343 era and what have you. But 2007 was a really big kind of dividing line in console shooting. And Resistance, I think, is a kind of in some ways, yeah. The you had to be there factor is, it's hard to go back to a time when shooter campaigns weren't influenced by Call of Duty and weren't like all of that sort of stuff. And so Resistance is on the other side of that line, and so I think that makes it a little bit harder to go back to, or harder to place yourself in that era, because of how pervasive all of those shooter campaigns and just shooters in general have been since, for those last 18 years, 19 years for Resistance. And yeah, Resistance 2 in a lot of ways feels like a response to the popularity of Call of Duty. I don't think they do a very good job. Like by that point, I think Resistance 2, if I'm remembering right, because it's been a long time, Resistance 2 does a worse job of following up on the original Resistance, and also a bad job of like being this kind of Call of Duty derived shooter. Like it's kind of, they lost it at both ends, and I want to say that after that they kind of got it back a little bit, but by that point I think there were only the people who were really far down that hole, like the really, and it was most often like the people that were like the big weird Sony fanboys, that were like, oh, anything they do is going to be amazing, this, look at it, like, and there were people that clung to Resistance 3 for whatever reason, specifically because they couldn't play Halo on their platform. And so Resistance was the, like, oh, Insomniac is geniuses and this and that. Like, yes, Insomniac are geniuses. I don't think that this is I don't think any part of that is their best work. At all. It's an interesting diversion from the company that made Ratchet and Clank. And that's kind of neat in a weird way to see them try to apply some of those ideas and concepts of like, what if the guns were weird in a first person shooter? But man, no thanks. Resistance, no thanks. I will say I was never on board with the Resistance franchise. Killzone, I think, was a better game in just about every way. Killzone 2, at least. But it's been a very long time since I played any of that. But I had a good time with Killzone. It's a flawed game in a lot of ways, but Killzone 2 and Killzone 3, the multiplayer there was a lot of fun, and they had some ideas. Jorge from San Diego writes in, during Master P's heyday, were you bout it, or maybe just bout it? Maybe you still are or never were. Just want to know what you think about Master P and No Limit. I would say I have a much more favorable view of No Limit and the music they were putting out back then now than I did then. Because when the Dirty South got big, when Master P made it big, when the No Limit tank was out there, you know, like that shit, like the way people talk about mumble rap now, or not now, but 5 years ago, 10, you know, or whatever. Who the fuck is talking about that anymore? But like the way that people would shit on kind of mumble rap and SoundCloud rap or whatever derisive terms that people came up with for music made by younger people that they don't like. That's how I felt about the rise of a lot of these acts out of the South, specifically Master P and his all of his artists that he had signed and all of the No Limit stuff. It was just like so fucking like I think the only thing I gave a pass personally at that point, the vaulted, you know, whatever, was Juvenile. I thought that Ha was a very funny song. But like that was the best that they could do, was like, here's this, like it's funny how bad this is, you know? And I look back on it now and I have a somewhat more favorable view of that. But like, yeah, no one, oh yes, Silk the Shocker's deep rhymes and yeah, what's up with Lil Zane and Lil Wayne? What's going on with all these hot acts? Oh, Lil Zane's not in the South, but Lil Wayne, the biggest lie that people fucking told themselves and made a thing, and I don't know how this happened. I don't know what songs it happened on the back of, or if it is just a generational shift that happened and values changed for what people wanted out of hip-hop. But I think that one of the fucking craziest things that has happened over the last, let's call it 20 years, is people convincing themselves that Lil Wayne has any value whatsoever as an MC. That like there's that he ever had anything to offer other than a couple of like catchy songs. I literally do not understand what people see in him and go like, oh, he's an amazing, his mind, like, oh, he's freestyle. Did you know he didn't write it? Like he you know, he does the Jay-Z thing of not writing his shit down before he goes in the studio. Like, yeah, it's awful. He's fucking terrible. Like, it's and not getting better, by the way, these days. But you know, like people are like, oh man, the Carter 3 is gonna, like, this shit sucks. What the fuck is wrong with you? I am still on that. The rest of the No Limit stuff, especially from back then, if you want to fucking talk to me about fucking back that ass up, it's a fucking heck of a song. It's a catchy song. And I think the thing I realized, you know, eventually, and this is partially because like I aged into an age where I was going out and drinking more often. And as a result of that, you enter into these more free-flowing situations where you're like, these songs are fun. Yeah, man, fucking put on all the big timers. Put the fucking big timers on. We're going to listen to this shit and have a bunch of drinks. And like, yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah. Why not? But like, yeah, this kind of like the way that Lil Wayne has been branded as some kind of like fucking credible fucking MC, like oh, his rhymes or something. Like, no, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, that's some shit that I'm still just like, no, what the fuck? If you want to tell me that you think like A Milli is a good song, I'm like, yeah, sure, yeah, it's catchy, yes. But there's nothing. I don't think that dude has anything to fucking offer. His appearance in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 deserved. He is as good as Tony Hawk 5. But yeah, I don't know, like Juvenile and, you know, like some of those other guys, BG. Great album covers. But yeah, you know, like, yeah, Project Pat is good. Like, yeah, I think like some of the stuff that happened around the edges of all of that, I think worked a lot better. And a lot of the stuff out of Texas, Rap a Lot and some of the other, you know, stuff that kind of came out of the screw music and all of that. I have no issues with any of that. But kind of specifically the No Limit and No Limit adjacent stuff that got popular back then, I was just like, what the fuck is this? Lil Wayne versus Lupe Fiasco. I would take Lupe Fiasco in that. I would absolutely take, and I don't like Lupe Fiasco, but I would take. That is an easy choice. But yeah, switch out. You know, you want to put some Paul Wall on? I'll be like, yes, let's listen to a little bit of Paul Wall. Why not? But I don't. But dude, yeah. So I feel like I came around on a lot of that stuff to a degree. And you know, and kind of like came to an understanding about why people like any of the No Limit stuff, you know, any of that. But Lil Wayne's elevation, Lil Wayne getting put on this weird pedestal is something that I still don't like. I've listened to all of that stuff, trying to hear what people are hearing in it, but Jesus Christ, what the fuck is wrong with these people? The decades and decades of lying to themselves about Lil Wayne is just fucking crazy. So I don't know, like at some point you just chalk it up and go like, is this like generational, and is this like what is the deal with this? Like, is it just like people who don't listen to a lot of other hip hop that are convinced that he's like, it's just, yeah, like I never understood where the excitement around him as an artist was ever coming from back then. Kind of as he broke out, as the No Limit stuff fell off, as Baby and Birdman and all that stuff, as that stuff kind of like fell away to the side, that Lil Wayne was the artist to have this like weird trajectory, to have this like much longer career than a lot of the people he was around. That was something I just never understood. I think even in around his own scene, there were people that were just like significantly more interesting than him. So I don't know, man. Like, it was just like, that's something that I still just like, I don't know why people fucking like that dude. I don't know why people fucking like that dude. Like, he, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say he can't rap or whatever, you know, like whatever bullshit like that. Like, yeah, he's a competent, credible rapper in his own way. But the idea that like he's got these bars that are just like, oh, it's fucking mind blowing, and like, I don't like what? Like, okay, like where, why, what name? Like, really? Really? This is the guy you're gonna, okay, all right. But yeah, anyway, that is my overall thought on kind of that whole thing. And like the No Limit stuff, like you go listen to the stuff that Beats by the Pound produced. Like, I think a really interesting record, if you really want to try to separate it and go like, well, what is going on here? What are we really listening to? It's that fucking Snoop album. It's No Limit Top Dog, right? Or is it The Game Is to Be Sold, Not to Be Told? Whatever the first album he put out on No Limit after all the Death Row shit blew up and everything. Like that first Snoop Dogg album that is primarily produced by Beats by the Pound, the in-house production team that did all of the No Limit stuff, and listening to Snoop rapping over that style of production. And so Snoop from being like, oh, he raps over Dre's shit and, it sounds like this or whatever. And Snoop is a credible artist and he's got these specific skills. And then you put him over those tracks and you go like, this is fucking fucked. What? Yuck. What is happening here? It just sounds like a bunch of idiots that don't know what the fuck they're doing with, like, I don't know, man, these keyboards, if I push these buttons, it does this. I'm like, what? Really? Like, it's crazy to me. It is crazy to me that anything about that style of production was viewed. And again, it's fun. It's like at their best, it was like good, fun kind of party music. And we're out here, we're fucking throwing 40 bottles at this fence and listen to, like, sure, dude. It makes sense. But yeah, dude, that whole thing. And, great artists came out of the South, right? Like various pockets of the South, whether it was, something like a 3-6 or, I mean, obviously Outkast or, yes, the whole Dungeon family, like yeah, all of that. T.I., yeah, T.I. has some great stuff. UGK, of course. Yeah, you're out here trying to like let me get excited about Master P's son has an album out here. But what about was it Small Soldiers? Was that their name? No, that's the movie. Lil Soldiers put out an album in 1999 called Boot Camp. And let me tell you, it's fantastic. If you like garbage, if you like listening to fucking trash, if you love listening to absolute bullshit, might I recommend getting your hands on a copy of the Lil Soldiers album Boot Camp. And give that a listen. Okay, Lil Zane's from Atlanta. I was like, is Lil Zane? Because that's maybe I was mixing up Lil Zane and Freaky Zeke. Yeah. So I had a real like a crisis moment with, like, as someone who had grown up listening to hip hop and stuff, to see all of that stuff getting like extremely popular. And suddenly Master P and all of these affiliated artists are everywhere. At the same time when, Birdman and Cash Money and that whole thing is happening as well. It was just like, what the fuck is happening here? But I don't know. Like, I think, Birdman is Birdman. Yeah. Do a whole separate, like, podcast about Birdman, I guess. I mean, I'm not going to. Someone could. We're gonna get into the depths of Drake and his affiliation with this and his, yeah. We're gonna go fucking Dark Kenny on him. Really dig into all of these relationships and how scummy they are. Let's see. Let's move on. Next email, Naveen in Ontario writes in and says, what do you consider retro? Not the academic, if it's X years old or whatever, but in your gut, what feels retro? And has that changed over time, or does it feel static to you? And as someone who's been paying attention to the medium since its earliest days, when did retro game enter the common parlance, and when did the concept what did the concept encompass at that time? So for me, if you like gut wise, I think PS3 and Xbox 360 is the first example of like modern gaming. And I think that's because you have system level integrations for internet and online play and a lot of that stuff. And so a lot of the things we're still dealing with today around DLC and add-ons and whatever else, the roots of today's gaming, most of it exists in that, or most of it existed in that generation in some way, shape, or form. And so for me, that's the split from modern gaming to old gaming. Is PS3 and 360 is the first generation of what we're in right now. And I think we're kind of coming to an end of that because of, as publishers crumble and as there is this kind of continued push into free to play, and also games as platforms like your Robloxes and things of that nature, I do think that we are undergoing like a pretty seismic shift right now, a very like disruptive and unwelcome sort of shift in a lot of ways right now. And I don't know what exists on the other side of that. It's a weird thing, right? But I think that's probably, if I'm just going with my gut, that's where it is. Anything PlayStation 2 or older, that is retro video gaming. And the 360, the PS3, that is all the stuff that you could envision a lot of today's games existing on those platforms in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, size and scope would be different from technical power, but like you could also envision bigger versions of those games without dramatic changes. Destiny exists on an Xbox 360. Destiny 2 just got its latest update right now. Some games literally encompassed all of those generations in a weird way. But I do think that, the is it 10 years old or whatever? Like, I think that's overly reductive in some ways. And I do think that it is kind of a moving target at the same time. Like, it does shift. The first time I remember retro gaming becoming a concept, I'm trying to think. Because you had, like, there were cases where, like, there's a Namco collection on the SNES, right? Isn't there a Pac-Man? Like there's a Namco museum kind of thing that came out on the SNES, I want to say, but maybe I'm wrong there. I mean, not Namco Museum literally, because that was a PlayStation franchise before it kind of came everywhere else. But like, there was like, I guess just Ms. Pac-Man was out on the SNES. So you did have this kind of like weird thing. There is an arcade collection on the Genesis, yeah. On the SNES, you got some really weird arcade ports that felt like a really... Yes, Midway Arcade's Greatest Hits is on SNES. That's yes. Yes, Danny, yes. That is what I was thinking of. But yeah, Ms. Pac-Man came out on the SNES as like a separate cartridge, and like, why would you do? And Mr. Do there's a SNES version of Mr. Do of all things. There's like no NES version, which would have made somewhat more sense for a Mr. Do port. And so it's just a really weird thing that exists. But yeah, you have Sega Ages collections on the Saturn in Japan, like a re-release of Space Harrier and some of that other stuff as well. And so there was a CDI collection of games that were not actual like versions of those games in some, well, I don't know, they were shitty. There's a CDI disc called Arcade Classics that has Galaxian, Ms. Pac-Man, and Galaga, but like fucked up versions of it because the CDI is so terrible. And Philips did these like funky ports of those games that it just didn't make any sense. Like it was terrible. But that's like a case where you've got like that's 96, a case of like them calling those games arcade classics and whatever. But like in a lot of cases, those games just sort of went away for a little period of time there. You know, the arcade games of old, like arcades kind of didn't exist the same way, or you didn't visit them because by the time we got to the mid 90s, you know, you had the fighting game boom. And so you went to arcades to play fighting games. And you know, after that, you know, kind of DDR became a bit of a thing here, you know, and so you would want to go see some of those bigger, crazier cabinets that were harder to play in the home. And so a lot of the kind of classic arcade cabinets and pinball machines and stuff kind of faded into the background. And so it makes sense that a lot of this stuff sort of came back around. But I'm trying to think like when was the first time that stuff was issued as being like quote unquote retro. And I remember some of the Midway compilations for like Xbox and PS2 and that sort of thing. Makes some sense. I mean, yeah, that SNES collection of Midway games didn't come out until 1995, and so the SNES was an old console by the time that came along. We were already, you know, the Saturn was well out, the PlayStation was out. Like, you know, we were kind of off to the races for the next generation by the time that thing came to SNES. I think it was coming to SNES at the same time it was also coming to like PlayStation and Saturn, if I remember correctly. But yeah, a lot of that stuff started to exist on handhelds as well, like Digital Eclipse. And you know, some of those studios started porting games to GBA and whatever. You had like Mortal Kombat games coming out. There was that Phantasy Star thing that came out, and you know, there was a lot of weird stuff like that coming along. And then for the Dreamcast, you know, we talk about Atari, you know, like when Hasbro owned all of this stuff, they started re-releasing new versions. Like they made a new Centipede. They made a new Frogger, which those games are fucking awful. Fucking terrible. Like that Frogger game is so fucking bad, but for whatever reason, it sold super well and they made sequels to it that were somehow even worse. And I do not understand. Frogger for the Dreamcast is the Lil Wayne of its era. And they're both equally disgusting. But yeah, I'm trying to think like when was that term first popularized? But I don't know that I have the answer to that question. That is an interesting question. But like the thing I remember around 1996 or so, late 96, early 97 was, you know, getting introduced to MAME, the emulator, and suddenly having a way to play all of these games that were impossible to find anymore because the cabinets just weren't around and arcades just weren't around the same way that they used to be. And so downloading MAME and playing something like Bagman for the first time in maybe 10 years or something was super exciting. Like Mr. Do, a great example of a fantastic video game that, you know, that could have been forgotten if not for some of the work that, you know, hobbyist emulation authors did back then. And that stuff was amazing, you know, like originally it was like, you know, it ran Pac-Man and a bunch of Pac-Man derivatives, you know, and that was neat. But seeing more and more of those arcade games finding their way back out in the strangest way imaginable, like that was great. And it also kind of clouded any retro release that came out in the wake of it, because you were like, okay, like this is worse. This runs worse than MAME. And some people creating those packages were actually licensing MAME for commercial use in some of those things, which was neat. But yeah. Alex from Lowell, Mass. Which LOL comes up if you were like, it seems like if you were talking about wrestling history, LOL Mass comes up all the time. Is that where Shawn Michaels got beat up by Marines or something, or got in a bar fight or something? Was that LOL? Anyway. Alex writes in and with a couple of questions about the Neo Geo CD and AES systems. I just grabbed a Neo Geo CD for cheap this year and I love it. But knowing the original price and the niche arcade appeal, I was wondering, what was it like covering the Neo Geo AES and CD back in the day? It seems like the system found some success, but who were the people actually buying these systems? Yeah, it was for like extreme rich kids. Like no one, I knew maybe one person that had a Neo Geo that didn't get one from SNK. For like review coverage or whatever. But like the Neo Geo was preposterous at launch. It was viewed as like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Like I remember being like angry, and I had access to one. I wasn't really working on much of anything at the time, but you know, I had access to one that had been sent out by SNK, and was able to play a handful of games on it and whatever. But like, you saw this thing and it was in the back of every EGM on like all the ads for all these weird retailers or something. They're like, do you want a Neo Geo Gold system? It's $700. And like the idea that they were charging so much money so that you could play fucking Magician Lord. Like, hey man, do you want to give us $700 for Magician Lord? And if you want another game, it's $300. It was disgusting. Now, eventually they would hit their stride and have some incredible fighting games on that platform. And when you're paying a quarter at a time, some of those early games have some appeal as well. You want to play a little bit of Cyberlip? Like, okay, no, but like, yeah, I'll play Cyberlip for 15 minutes. I'm not going to give you $300 for a copy of fucking Cyberlip. And so just the entire concept felt almost criminal. And, you know, it was easy to understand, like, okay, well, yeah, this is the same quality as the arcade game, and, you know, it's literally the same thing. But, like, a lot of those games were average at best. Like, they're not all amazing video games. And so the early days of Neo Geo was kind of, you had these fighting games in the early days of Neo Geo, pre-Samurai Showdown even, that were like, okay, like, your shitty Street Fighter knockoff sucks. Like, I don't want to play Art of Fighting 1. I don't want to fucking play Art of Fighting anything, to be honest. But, you know, Fatal Fury was good. And you're like, okay, this is kind of cool. Yeah, okay, all right. But like a lot of those games were not super fun to even play in arcades at the time. And so seeing Neo Geo cabinets with some of those early games, pre-King of Fighters, pre-Samurai Showdown, you're just like, I don't like, these games are not fucking fun enough to like, none of this is worth it. Like, I don't even want to play this game when it's sitting next to a better fighting game in an arcade. I was like, hey dog, you want to play some Fight Fever? I do not. And so the early days of covering the Neo Geo was like that. It was just like, this thing is stupid. This thing, like, these people are assholes. What the fuck? Like, none of these games are worth the money. These games would be bad values at like $60, $50, whatever the normal price for 16-bit games were at the time. Like, none of those were fucking great games to begin with. It wasn't until like you saw like The Super Spy and you're like, oh, well, this is kind of cool. Like, I still don't want to pay this kind of money for it. That's ridiculous. But you see it and you go like, there's something kind of impressive about this. Um, but yeah, man, a lot of those early games were just not that fun. Like Nom 75 is like, it's cool, but it's not $300 cool. And so for me, it wouldn't make, nothing about the Neo Geo would make sense until way later. Way later. Let's say 1998 as an example. No, that's not true. As soon as like Samurai Showdown 1 comes out, like that's at least a great game. Samurai Showdown 2 is an all-timer for sure. KOF 95, great game. 94, I don't much care for it. Well, like you start to at least get to a point where like the games are impressive, and as 2D becomes a harder thing to do, and fewer companies are doing it in kind of a post PlayStation era, like the high level 2D art of something like Mark of the Wolves, obviously, but even like KOF 98 and like Last Blade and Last Blade 2 and some of that stuff, like some of that stuff's awesome. Like Metal Slug, those games are fun. I wouldn't want to pay the kind of money it would take to, especially now, to buy those cartridges. It's ridiculous. Like Fighter's History Dynamite is like fun, but not that kind of fun. And so that was a big part of it. Like in the early days of that, kind of before it became known as like a system full of like really cool fighting games. It was a system with a bunch of like also ran fighting games and a bunch of other kind of arcade games that you're like, no one wants to play this type of game anymore. And so I always looked at it as like, yes, this is the arcade experience at home, but not the arcade experience I'm trying to have. And so if anything, it became a big flashing ad for super guns. And you're like, if you buy this thing and wire it up the right way, you can play actual real fucking Street Fighter 2 on a TV. You're like, really? Now that's exciting. Because that's Street Fighter motherfucking 2. But then the SNES versions of those were good enough that you kind of, you didn't really need a super gun anyway, if you weren't crazy. And so yeah, I think that was the thing. And so the Neo Geo CD was their opportunity to put out a system that had more reasonably priced games. But for that, like their one selling point was, this is literally the exact same experience in the arcades. By the time the Neo Geo CD came out, there were a lot of games on the Neo Geo that you realized you didn't want to really play much of, or that much of. You didn't need to own most of these games. And so the idea of buying a still expensive baseline console, which was, it was like $400 or $500. Like it was the Neo Geo CD was still expensive, especially if you wanted the CD-Z, because the loading times were ridiculous on the original baseline model. And the Neo Geo CD, in addition to its long load times, cut frames of animation because it just didn't have the same, like they couldn't hold all the frames in RAM. And so they had to make cut versions of the game for CD. And so they lost the benefit of having these arcade perfect games at this point. You can, if you really want to play like a Fatal Fury game, it exists on like the SNES. I think it came out on like Sega CD even, if I'm right. But there was anyway. And those versions of the game are fine. They're not perfect, obviously, but they're also not $300. And they don't take a zillion years to load. And so I played a lot of World Heroes on the SNES back then, because it's like an enjoyable fighting game and all of that, but again, not worth that kind of money. The SNK people were very high and mighty about their system, and they did not like that criticism. There were people there that would get into fights on the early days of the internet over that sort of stuff. And the system had its kind of share of fanboys, but like, I don't know, man, like what are they? They're like fucking weird asshole rich kids. Like, it's just crazy. I have nothing but respect for that system now. I bought mine at a time when some games were available for a lot less than $300. I bought 4 copies of Samurai Showdown 2 for like $7 each in Japan. It was great. It felt like I was robbing someone, you know? But then I went and paid $1,100 for a copy of Mark of the Wolves. So really, who's the sucker? Who can say? Who can say, really? But yeah, it's the Neo Geo CD. No one cared. I remember it coming out and being like, "Oh, is there going to be any games specifically for it?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then the answer kind of ended up being like, "Not really, but yeah. I mean, yeah, this Samurai Showdown RPG that we're not going to translate into English or whatever. Like, yeah, I mean, technically, it was like 2-3 games." Which I think there's a translation of that game out there now, which I did always mean to go back and play because it sounded, yeah, Cross Swords 2. No thanks. No, thank you. But I remember being at E3, our booth for Blaster Magazine, the magazine I was working for at the time. This is how you could tell we did not have a good booth placement, is we were right next to the Neo Geo CD, which was also positioned far away from the action. I guess maybe that would have been the last CES, the last big game CES before E3. And not actual E3. Anyway. And a bunch of people stole the discs out of the Neo Geo CDs that were being used at the kiosks. Like a lot of stuff got, like controllers and shit got stolen. Great controller on the Neo Geo CD. It's neat. But still, no. Max in Brisbane, who writes in again to say that Sydney eats shit. Asks, do you think that the failure of Mind's Eye and whatever the fuck everywhere was began when the studio was named Build a Rocket Boy? What's the dumbest game dev studio name? What would you name your dumb game studio? I don't know. Build a Rocket Boy is a reference to something. It is I don't know if it's a song or like a reference to a movie or something, but it is specifically it is some reference to some other thing. But I don't know what I don't know offhand what it is. But in 2011, a band called Elbow put out an album called Build a Rocket Boys. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that's where it came from. Maybe it did, but I don't. I think that they are also probably referencing the same thing. But I don't know off the top of my head what the reference is. I think was it advanced? We were playing Wet last week. There's a video of me playing Wet on the internet again. Finally, the studio now known as Behavior Interactive. They were originally known as Artificial Mind and Movement Incorporated, and they would abbreviate it to A2M. That's pretty dumb. That's a pretty bad one. Then they realized what they had done, and so back in 2010 they renamed themselves to Behavior Interactive. And so, yeah, okay, this Wikipedia page says, on November 8th, 2010, Artificial Mind and Movement announced its name was returning to Behavior Interactive. I guess that was something they used previously. The change was partly due to increased production of original titles and thus stronger presence in the gaming community, partly due to the availability of the original name, and partly due to one particular obscene interpretation of the initialism A2M. Yep. I don't know how you walk into that. I mean, whatever. I guess that shit happens all the time. Not everyone is much of a fucking sicko, but like when the studio came along and said, yeah, we're called A2M, it was like stifling. Like, I'm sorry, what? What now? It wasn't like something where like the other definition came along later and ruined their thing. It was like, what? You're called what? Wow. Build a Rocket Boy, I think, is a bad name for a studio, but yeah, it is some reference to something, and maybe it is a song title or something like that. It struck me funny. Were they just innocent? I mean, they're Canadian, so you know. With all the new music that is on the Tony Hawk soundtrack for 3 and 4, I am surprised. And if there were ever to be a new Tony Hawk game, if the dream comes true, and Iron Galaxy gets to make a brand new Tony Hawk game, I think it is weird, or rather, that would be the right time for them to put the Cannibal Ox track, Iron Galaxy, onto the soundtrack of a Tony Hawk game that they are developing. They should do that. Iron Galaxy, the track does not necessarily lend itself super well to being on a video game soundtrack. It has kind of a long intro that you'd probably have to trim to get to the meat of it. But they should finally just do that. They should just put, was it in Thug 1? No. Was Iron Galaxy in Thug 1? Well, it's hard to just search for that now because of Iron Galaxy's name being in proximity to Tony Hawk. Anyway. Yeah, Gamecock Studios. That was a stupid name for a studio, but like they knew that. They went in like Mike and them. They went in knowing what they were doing when they went and named a studio Gamecock. I have a Gamecocks jersey, not from the studio, from the school. It's like a college. Like there's a college whose like mascot or their team name is the Gamecocks. And so I bought a jersey for that because I figured, well, that probably, yeah, University of South Carolina, yeah. Iron Galaxy was in Thug 1. All right, then I guess they need to remake Thug 1. It's all been building to this. Don't fuck this up. Don't fuck this up. Ian writes in and says, I was at an anime convention over the weekend. Wow. One of the games they had was Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, a platformer you play with a trackball. I never thought I'd find a game I could confidently say is the worst Sonic game, but I did. While not involved, it made me question how Yuji Naka has spent so much time outside of prison. I think that game is really neat. I don't think it's a great game, but Sega had that game at their booth in 92, whatever year it was, but like they had that game in an arcade cabinet on the show floor at CES. That game came out in Japan in 93, so this would have probably been sometime in 93. And they just had it set to free play. And so I sat down and played a fucking ton of it. They did the same thing with Virtua Fighter 1. And just had a VF1 cabinet at their booth. And I played a fuckload of it. I was like, this game's great. And then when that game came out and they wanted $1 per play, it was a lot less great. It was a lot less great at $1 a game than it was for free. Surprise, I know. But that Sonic game was crazy because that was a time when the internet then was not what the internet is now. And there was just like things that were hard to find information on. And so that Sonic game, which you haven't seen it is a trackball game. So you're rolling this trackball to move Sonic or like Ray or whoever else is in that game. A great cast of alternate characters. Mighty, yes. And you're rolling them all around with the trackball, and it is in an isometric angle. I guess not entirely unlike Sonic 3D Blast, but anyway. It was out of nowhere. You're just like, you see this like totally different Sonic game and you're like, what the fuck is this? And I played quite a bit of it and never knew what the name of it was because it just said Sonic the Hedgehog. And the top of the cabinet just said Megalo 50. And I was like, is this game called Megalo 50? Because I was not used to the Japanese arcade cabinet where that is the name of the cabinet. You can go look at what a Megalo 50 is. It's a cool fucking arcade cabinet. But for the longest time, I was like, yeah, man, when's that Megalo 50 game coming out? What the fuck is up with that? I have not seen it since. And years went by. And I think maybe there was a screenshot of it in EGM or something based on its appearance at that same trade show. And so a couple of screenshots made the rounds, but like it just never resurfaced. And I was like, I don't know, man, what the fuck happened? Like I thought that game was coming out. Well, they showed it there, like, and it just never showed up anywhere because it never made its way outside of Japan. And so it became this lost game, and I was obsessed with it. Like, what the fuck happened to that fucking game? And so it finally materialized years later inside of MAME, and you realize like, oh, it's called Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, and you know, you kind of get the reality of it, and you know, that was like years later. But for the longest time, for me, that game was a fucking mystery. And so it gained this mythical status in my head as like that cool fucking trackball Sonic game that I never saw again. What the fuck? You go back and play it now, like, yeah, it's not great. But I would not say it is the worst Sonic the Hedgehog game by a long shot. That game is kind of neat still. And you know, I don't know. It's an interesting fucking thing. It's a weird game for sure. And it looks neat. And again, that Megalo 50, that cabinet is fucking cool as hell. It's one of those big old long projection 50-inch cabinets. It's just crazy. But I have a sick love of Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, which is also a dumb name for the game. The idea that it's Sega Sonic the Hedgehog with like Sega Sonic one word, capital S's. I don't know what they're doing there, but yeah, it's a weird hidden gem that's hard to play now because, you know, no one has a trackball anymore. I keep thinking about getting a trackball, but I already bought a spinner and I never used that. So, you know, that's going to do it for the show. Thanks everybody. I will be back with you tomorrow and we will do something with video games. We'll hang out and of course be back on Friday to rank some 8-bit Nintendo games. Next week will be a slightly different schedule. I probably won't be with you on Wednesday. We'll do the podcast as usual on Tuesday. And then I am not going to be with you again until Friday, the 1st, which is my birthday. So I'm trying to figure out some scheduling stuff, but I might just, I don't know. I might just do a long stream on Friday. I might just, you know, just hang out and play some games and just do some random stuff for my birthday or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. Well, that's the plan right now. I got to figure out stuff with the kids and who's going where and who's doing what and all that. But yes, we'll figure out something for. Hopefully, figure out something for that Friday. But that Wednesday, I will not be around. But yeah. That's the current thinking. But this week will be normal. As normal as it gets around here, am I right? Woo! Woo! Anyway, I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Bye.